Hi, good evening everyone. In the last class we were discussing about the citizenship provisions under the constitution. We have discussed that article 5 to 10 were relevant for the citizenship status at the time of the commencement of the constitution, and the provisions under article 11 provides powers to the parliament to make a law to decide the citizenship status after the constitution came into force. And therefore the Citizenship Act of 1955 laid down some of the provisions for the acquisition and the termination of the citizenship in India. As far as the acquisition is concerned, I have discussed with you that in India citizenship can be acquired either by birth, by taking birth on the territory of India, but you need to meet a certain other conditions as well. And apart from that, you can get citizenship by descent as well, without taking birth in territory of India if you have been born to either of the Indian parents, and if your birth has been registered at the nearest Indian embassy or the consulate within a period of 1 year. Apart from that, there is a citizenship by registration provision as well. If you have some kind of a link with India, if you have been a person of Indian origin married to an Indian citizen, then you can get Indian citizenship by registration. And then there is the provisions related to citizenship by naturalization as well. After spending a certain number of years in India, you can become eligible to acquire the Indian citizenship. And then I have also discussed that there is another provision, citizenship by incorporation of territory as well. If there is some territory which is not a part of India's territory, if it is acquired as a part of India's territory by the union, then in that particular case as well, you become eligible to acquire the citizenship of India. So this is as far as the acquisition of the citizenship is concerned. There are two more things that we need to discuss under the citizenship provisions. One is the termination of the citizenship of a person, and third one is the overseas citizenship of India as a concept. What does it mean? What are the benefits that one gets as an overseas citizen of India by holding an OCI card, etc., and all of those things. So you please write down first loss of citizenship. So let's quickly discuss about loss of citizenship. So I'm guessing that today we should be able to cover most of the topics that I have in my mind, and then tomorrow's class should be the last class. We will cover the topics related to election and Election Commission India. So we'll be covering of the syllabus tomorrow. So let's first talk about loss of citizenship. First is the renunciation. So one way in which the loss of citizenship can happen according to the provisions of the Citizenship Act is through renunciation. These are all provisions related to loss of citizenship in India. So, renunciation. You may write down a person may lose the citizenship if he or she, a person may lose the citizenship if he or she voluntarily gives up the citizenship of India, voluntarily gives up the citizenship of India, or acquires the citizenship of some other country. Voluntarily gives up the citizenship of India or acquires the citizenship of another country. So if you give up the citizenship of India, then you become, lose your Indian citizenship, of course. Or if, since Indian constitution at least at present, or the Indian law at present does not allow dual citizenship, if you go on to acquire the citizenship of some other country of the world, then you automatically lose the Indian citizenship, and that is what is called as the renunciation. You have given up your citizenship. Termination is also very similar to this. In renunciation, you are giving up your citizenship voluntarily, whereas in termination, if the government comes to know that you have acquired the citizenship of some other country voluntarily, since the constitution does not allow dual citizenship, you would lose your Indian citizenship through that method. So एक तो है renunciation कि आप खुद से जाके Indian citizenship give up कर दें, और दूसरा है termination. When the government comes to know that you have acquired the citizenship of some other state, then of course, since the Indian law does not allow dual citizenship, you would lose your Indian citizenship as per an order issued by the government. So please write down termination. Even the government may terminate the citizenship of a person. Even the government may terminate the citizenship of a person upon acquiring. Even the government may terminate the citizenship of a person upon acquiring citizenship of some other country. Upon acquiring citizenship of some other country. Citizenship of some other country. So this is what is called as termination. And the third one is what we call as deprivation. So you may be even deprived of your citizenship. See, termination also you are being deprived of your citizenship, but that is because you have acquired the citizenship of some other country. Deprivation is if, let's say, you have acquired the citizenship of India through some fraudulent means, through misrepresentation of facts, by providing wrong information to the government. In that case, your citizenship may be terminated by the government. So you please write down about deprivation. The government may deprive a person. The government may deprive a person of citizenship in case it is acquired through. May deprive a person of citizenship in case it is acquired through fraud. In case it is acquired through fraud, comma, concealment. You have concealed some facts or information. Concealment. False representation. False representation. Or if the person shows disloyalty. If the person shows disloyalty or disaffection. Person shows disloyalty or disaffection towards the Constitution of India and the country. Disloyalty and disaffection towards the Constitution of India and the country. Right? So if you show disloyalty or disaffection towards the Constitution of India and the country, then you may be subject to deprivation of the citizenship as well. Or if you have concealed some data, if you have misrepresented some fact, if you have provided some wrong information to the government, right? If you were supporting Australia yesterday, so in that case, anyway, you supporting or not supporting wouldn't have made a difference. So loss of citizenship can happen, है ना? अगर आपको देख लिया जाता कल स्टेडियम के अंदर पीले कपड़े पहने हुए, तो आग लगा दी जाती आपके अंदर. Anyway, so this is loss of citizenship. Then we have the overseas citizenship of India. तुम्हार कोई ब्लेम किया जाता हार के लिए? देखो यही सब होता है स्पोर्ट्स के अंदर. People should understand this. बट इंडिया में लोगों को स्पोर्ट्स वगैरह की समझ नहीं है ना. देख खेले नहीं है खुद से तो क्या करें. इसीलिए अब जो है सब, अभी तक कल अगर जीत जाते तो बड़ा खुश होते हैं, नाचते झूमते. अभी जो है सब कमियां दिख रही हैं उनको टीम के अंदर. ऐसा आपको बहुत लोग मिल जाएंगे, चाय की टपरी के ऊपर, पान वाले की दुकान पे, तुम्हारे घर के अंदर अंकल, मौसा, बुआ, फूफा सब मिल जाएंगे अभी क्रिटिसाइज करने वाले. अब सब कमियां दिखेंगी उन्हें. ऐसा ही तुम्हारे साथ भी होगा, याद रखना ये बात. जब क्वालिफाई कर जाओगे जब क्वालिफाई कर जाओगे तो कोचिंग इंस्टीट्यूट खूब तुम्हारा फोटो छापेगा, है ना, मिल्क करेगा तुम्हारे नाम को, सब जो है इधर उधर का रिश्तेदार जो है सब, हर कोई अपना रिश्ता बनाएगा कि मैंने इसको बचपन में लड्डू खिलाया था इसीलिए इसका सिलेक्शन हुआ, और ये सब आलतू फालतू का बकवास करेगा. एंड व्हेन यू विल नॉट गेट सेलेक्टेड नो वन विल गिव अ डैम, एंड देन दे विल से कि हाँ वो उस लड़की के साथ घूमता था ना इसलिए हुआ ये, हाँ, पढ़ाई में कहाँ ध्यान था इसका. तो ये सब होगा. दिस इज व्हाट विल हैपन. This is how people are. This is how the society is. You have to understand that. And I'm sure there must be some among you also, those who must be criticizing the same cricket team. Till yesterday, 2 o'clock, they had all the hopes. 2 o'clock नहीं, 3 बजे तक, जब तक छक्का चौका पड़ रहा था तब तक तो खुश थे, बड़ा एकदम ताली बजा रहे थे. अभी मैं होके क्या है ना, तो अभी कोई बोल रहा है कि अरे तो होना ही था, ये रोहित शर्मा ये सब जो है इतना बड़ा इनको चढ़ा के रखा हुआ है. जब तक वो कल 2:30-3 बजे तक छक्का चौका मार रहा था तब तक तुम्हें कोई दिक्कत नहीं था, पर जैसे ही अभी हार गए, कल जीत जाते तो फिर तुम नहीं ये सब बोलते. हार गए तो अभी तो ये एक्चुअली वी डिजर्व दिस. व्हाई? बिकॉज एज अ नेशन वी डोंट एक्चुअली अंडरस्टैंड द स्पिरिट ऑफ स्पोर्ट्स. स्पोर्ट्स, you lose, you win some. This is how it is. You know, you have to give credit to the other team as well. You have to give credit to the others as well, that they have done extremely well, that we should try to learn from them instead of just criticizing ourselves all the time, you know. And at times there is an element of luck as well, there is an element of chance as well. There are so many things that go in your favor, that don't go in your favor, which you don't understand. ये बड़ा important है. एग्जाम के अंदर भी ये ध्यान रखिएगा बात, because as I have told you time and again, देखिए सब कुछ करके भी everything was done right, then you win 10 and then you lose the 11th one. No one is going to remember what you did in the first 10. Everyone is going to talk about what you did in the 11th. The same is with the UPSC exam as well. You will qualify all the stages. You will qualify prelims, you will qualify mains, you will reach the interview. You would have done well in the interview as well, but if you don't find your name in the merit list, people will think that you are a failure. But believe me, that is not how things work. That is not how life works. You know, success or failure on one day, in one examination, in one cricket match, in one hockey match, in one moment does not define what a person is. Sports persons work there. ये तो देखिए क्रिकेट है, इसके अंदर तो इतनी अपॉर्चुनिटी होती है to make a comeback for a cricketer. I can tell you that because I played cricket, I play cricket, and I can tell you this for a fact, that it's very easy for a cricketer. For the other sports person, those who are athletes, those who are competing in Olympics, they get barely a few seconds. That their entire hard work of 4 years of their entire life comes down to just those few seconds of how they do things in those few seconds. You make one mistake, you are out of it. That is how it is. And it's very ruthless out there at the international level. It is absolutely ruthless. Some of the sports are extremely ruthless. You know, I read this one book by Abhinav Bindra, the autobiography which he has written. If you read that, then you understand the kind of struggles which he had to go through. First he went to Sydney Olympics, then he went to Athens Olympics, then he went to Beijing Olympics, and that is when he won the gold, right? And he lost out twice. But in his sport, he says that the margin is so less. In his game, it is even lesser. इस सब के अंदर तो क्या है कि इतना बड़ा बॉल है, इतना बड़ा विकेट है, इतना बड़ा बल्ला है ना, दैट इज अ डिफरेंट थिंग. देयर इट इज लिटरली फाइनेस्ट ऑफ द मार्जिन्स द स्कोर होवर्स इन शूटिंग एज अ स्पोर्ट. बिल्कुल फाइनेस्ट ऑफ द 0.001 मिलीमीटर के ऊपर गेम चल रहा है वहां पे, एज थिन एज योर हेयर स्ट्रैंड. That is the kind of sport which people are playing. So it is but obvious that you will do well at times and you will not do well at times. And that is also one thing. If you read his book, and that is what happened with him when he won the gold, Abhinav Bindra, after that he didn't know what to do, because he believed that I have achieved what I wanted to. इस पूरी जिंदगी मैंने इसी के लिए मेहनत की 10-15 साल, अब मैंने अचीव कर लिया. So he felt a vacuum. He retired from the sport. Then he came back again because he said कि I was not feeling the thrill any longer. मेरे को पता ही नहीं था. When you reach the top, when you reach the pinnacle, that is when you actually don't know what is to be done after that. जब आप सबसे ऊपर पहुंच जाते हैं तब सबसे ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम होती है आदमी को, क्योंकि पता नहीं होता कि ऊपर का अब कहाँ जाएं. What is the next goal in life? So then he restarted again. He left shooting, then he came back again. The point that I'm trying to make is that even in exam, even in real life, this will happen. Don't expect life to be a bed of roses. है ना? It will always, there will be times when you will face success, when you will get failure. At times you will get success when you were not expecting success. At times you will get failure when you were not expecting failure. But this is what life is. है ना? तो you have to live with the reality of the life and just move on. Yes, it hurts, it feels bad. And आप भी लोग मेहनत कर रहे हैं, तैयारी कर रहे हैं. मैंने हमेशा ये बात बोली है कि ये पहली क्लास से मैंने बात बोली है, एग्जाम में सक्सेस होगा नहीं होगा ये किसी के बस की बात नहीं है बताना, है ना. देयर इज नो वन हु कैन सी थ्रू दैट क्रिस्टल बॉल एंड कैन टेल वेदर यू विल क्वालिफाई द एग्जाम और नॉट. दिस इज ऑल नॉनसेंस. There are so many things which are out of your hands. There are so many things which are dependent on luck. So many other factors which are there, which are beyond your control. You can't be controlling those things. You have to focus on what you can do, what is in your hands. है ना. कंट्रोल जो आपके हाथ में हैं चीजें, उनको कंट्रोल कीजिए, मेहनत कीजिए अपनी तरफ से, so that at the end of the day, even when success doesn't come to you, which is anyway not a guarantee, you at least feel satisfied that I worked hard, that I did what I could to the best of my ability. मैं अपनी तरफ से जितना कर सकता था उतना मैंने किया, है ना. सो दैट इज व्हाट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. वही बस सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट चीज है. I mean, people may say things. I believe that they fought really well. I think they fought till the last whatever they could. Their body language never showed that they had given up at any point of time. I think that's the best thing which you expect from when someone is representing your country or when someone is fighting it out for the country. Success or failure and all of these things are just a matter of here and there. And ifs and buts are a lot of things which can happen in life. And you should remember that. ये बड़ा एक important चीज़ है. आपको इससे एक lesson मिलना चाहिए एग्जाम के लिए कि आप सब कुछ सही करेंगे तब भी हो सकता है कुछ गलत हो जाए, है ना. डिस्पाइट doing everything correctly, despite reading all the books, despite solving all the questions, things may go wrong. हो जाता है. This is what is human, है ना. But you have to accept it, move on, take a lesson from it and do well in life in whatever you are doing. That is what your idea and attempt should be. ये बड़ा important चीज़ है जो सबको समझना चाहिए. Success is not everything. And what is success ultimately? You may become an IAS if you're not happy. I always say this. If you're not happy, if you become an IAS, if you're not enjoying what you're doing, so it doesn't matter. Then all of this is a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. है ना. कोई फायदा नहीं है. आप बन जाइए सेक्रेटरी, बन जाइए गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया के अंदर, आप प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया बन जाइए, आप खुश नहीं है तो क्या फायदा है. And I can show you people, those who are living in the mountains, those who are living an ignorant life, they are completely living a blissful life. They don't have money, they don't have the resources, they don't have the mobile phones, they don't have all the facilities that we have, but yet they are living a very blissful life. So you have to remember that at the end of the day. सबसे important objective जिंदगी में इंसान खुशी ढूंढता है. Just try to look for that in whatever you can. That's it. Anyway, so now overseas citizenship of India. Right, so when we talk about overseas citizenship of India, earlier in India before 2015 we used to have two kind of citizenship provisions for the overseas Indians or for the NRIs or for those who are of Indian origin. One was overseas citizenship of India and the other one was the PIO, persons of Indian origin. अब इन दोनों को जो है वो combine कर दिया गया है. Right, and we have now only one single concept which is called as the overseas citizenship of India. If you are an overseas citizen of India, you enjoy almost all the rights which are enjoyed by the Indian citizens. आप सब वही तरीके के सारे rights enjoy करते हैं जो एक Indian citizen enjoy करता है, except a few rights which are enjoyed by specifically the citizens of India, such as contesting the office for the elected representatives or appearing for the government exams, etc. and all of those things. उसके अलावा every other right is almost enjoyed by the overseas citizens of India as well. So you write down a few things about the overseas citizenship of India and we will discuss as we proceed further. Please write down. An OCI is a person. An OCI is a person who was a citizen of India, on or after, who was a citizen of India on or after 26 Jan 1950, on or after 26 Jan 1950, or was eligible to become a citizen of India or was eligible to become a citizen of India after 26 Jan 1950, or was eligible to become a citizen of India after 26 Jan 1950, or is a child or a grandchild, or is a child or a grandchild of such a person, or is a child or a grandchild of such a person. चाइल्ड और अ ग्रैंड चाइल्ड ऑफ सच अ पर्सन. तो मतलब कोई भी ऐसा आदमी जो कि इंडियन ओरिजिन का हो, वो ओवरसीज सिटीजनशिप ऑफ इंडिया के लिए एलिजिबल है. यू राइट डाउन, अ पर्सन वुड नॉट बी एलिजिबल फॉर ओसीआई a person would not be eligible for OCI status if he or his parents or grandparents, if he if he if he or his parents or grandparents have ever been a citizen of Pakistan, have ever been a citizen of Pakistan or Bangladesh, have ever been a citizen of Pakistan or Bangladesh, ever been a citizen of Pakistan or Bangladesh. So, what are the benefits of OCI, Overseas Citizenship of India status? OCI status का क्या benefits हैं? Please write down. Benefits of OCI. Other details if you want related to the OCI, you can search it on the internet and see, you know, what are all of those things, but that is not necessarily required, but still. Anyway, so please write down benefits of OCI. First, multi-purpose, multi-entry, multi-purpose, comma, multi-entry and lifelong visa. Multi-purpose, multi-entry and lifelong visa for visiting India. Multi-purpose, multi-entry and lifelong visa for visiting India. For visiting India. Multi-purpose, multi-entry and lifelong visa for visiting India. Second, so multi-purpose का मतलब ये है that you can visit India for any purpose. You will have multiple entry visa. You can enter India into as many number of times and exit. There is no restriction on that. And it will be a lifelong visa. You don't need to renew that visa. Once the OCI citizenship is there, then you can enter India into India without any visa actually. Visa free access will be given to you. Second, exemptions from registration with local police authority. Exemptions from registration with the local police authority. With the local police authority for any length of stay in India. With the local police authority for any length of stay in India. For any length of stay in India. So, this is also important that earlier when you would be a PIO, let us say, if you stayed over PIO card अगर आपके पास होता था, तो if you would stay in India for a certain duration, over a certain duration, then you needed to go to the local police station and inform the police that you would be overstaying or you would be staying for these many more number of days, etc. and all of that. Now there is absolutely no requirement for an overseas citizen of India to do so. You can stay in India just as any other Indian citizen does without informing any of the local police authorities, etc. Next, please write down special immigration counter at the Indian airports. Special immigration counter at the Indian airports. Special immigration counter at the Indian airports. So you can be if you come to India for the immigration purposes, then at that point of time there are different queues which have been put up. There are different counters which are put up. There are few counters which are put up for the Indian citizens. Then there are some which are put up for the foreign citizens, and then there are some which are put up for the overseas citizens of India. So special counter hota hai. So you end up spending lesser time at the immigration counter in the airports. Then you please write down, they can exercise ownership rights over property. So they can basically own property in India, real estate in India, except agricultural land. They can exercise ownership rights over property and apply for an Indian PAN card. And apply for an Indian PAN card. So they can apply for an Indian PAN card. That means that they can run businesses in India, they can pay taxes in India, they can get employment in India, and they can own a property in India as well. But overseas citizen of India, of course, comes with some of its limitations as well. You're not exactly the citizen of India, so please write down some of these limitations as well. Limitations of OCI status. So first is, no voting rights are provided. No voting rights are provided. So you don't get any voting rights. No voting rights are provided. Second, cannot hold government offices. Cannot hold government offices. Cannot hold government offices, constitutional offices, जो भी है ये सब आप नहीं hold कर सकते हो. Cannot hold government offices. Next, cannot contest elections. Cannot contest elections. Cannot contest elections. Next, cannot purchase agricultural land. Cannot purchase agricultural land. So you can't purchase agricultural land. You can purchase all the other type of property in India, but not agricultural land if you are an overseas citizen of India, because this is only reserved for the Indian citizens. And then you please write down, do not enjoy the protection under, do not enjoy the protection under do not enjoy protection under Article 15, 16, 19, Article 15, 16, 19, 29 and 30. Article 15, 16, 29, 19, 29 and 30, because these are the rights which are enjoyed only by the citizens of India. Right, so this is as far as the citizenship provisions are concerned. I doubt if UPSC will ask a question in the mains examination related to the citizenship, but there is still a possibility that in the prelims examination there may be a few questions. In fact, I forgot. Let's just quickly write down one very brief paragraph about the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 as well. So, Citizenship Act of 2019, there was a lot of controversy that happened in the country over the Citizenship Act, Amendment Act 2019. But, if you see, the reality is that the government has not even bothered to frame the rules for bringing this particular law into force. So, that also is something which is very suspicious. It seems, and I have been holding this position for a very long time, that the perspective or the purpose of bringing in this amendment act was never to do anything, but was just to create an issue and was to just polarize the society, and that is what it was easily able to do. Otherwise, if there was actually an intention to be really doing something with this act, then at least the government would have framed the rules related to this act, would have tried to bring it into force. Since it didn't, it shows that there was never any seriousness associated with this act. Anyway, it was just possibly a gimmick that was made by the political parties in order to get the votes, in order to create tensions in the society, and they were able to easily achieve that. Anyway, so now please write down Citizenship Amendment Act 2019. The Amendment Act of 2019 provided that any person, the Amendment Act 2019 of 2019 provided that any person belonging to Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, Jain, Parsi, or Christian community from Pakistan, Afghanistan, or Bangladesh. From Pakistan, Afghanistan, or Bangladesh. Who entered India on or before 31st December 2014, shall not be treated as an illegal immigrant. If exempted under the Passport Act, or the Foreigners Entry Act, Foreigner Entries Act by the central government. So basically, these minorities from the neighboring countries would be considered as persecuted minorities, and if they would have migrated to India before 31st of December 2014, then they would not be treated as an illegal immigrant in India. That is what this provision was. You please write down. This amendment sought to provide citizenship, aimed to provide. This amendment sought to provide citizenship to persecuted minorities. In the above mentioned neighboring countries. In the above mentioned neighboring countries. Right? So this is as far as the citizenship provisions are concerned. Now let's move on to the next topic, and that is a very important topic. There is only one question that you will find has been asked related to this in the mains examination. I think that was in 2017 or 18, related to how the functions of the office of the CAG are supposed to be performed, and discussing the issues associated with the office of the CAG. So let's discuss about the office of the CAG. We have not discussed this, right? Huh? Have we discussed this? No. Okay. So, Office of Comptroller and Auditor General under the Indian Constitution. Chapter 5 of Part 5 of the Indian Constitution. Provisions under Article 148 to Article 151. Right, provisions under Article 148 to Article 151, Office of Comptroller and the Auditor General of India, Chapter 5, Part 5 of the CAG's office. अब पहली बात तो ये कि जब डॉक्टर अंबेडकर से पूछा गया that what according to you is the most important, or which according to you are the important provisions of the constitution and important constitutional posts that have been created, he stated that in my opinion the office of the comptroller and the auditor general in India is perhaps the most important office that has been created by the Constitution of India. What is the reason for that? Because as per his belief, and generally as well, the belief which goes around is that the biggest frauds, the biggest misuse of powers happens by the government, by the executive in financial domain. It is in the financial domain that we often see that the governments try to embezzle the funds, misappropriate the funds, and therefore a lot of wrong information is passed on to the legislature by the executive in order to mislead them as well, because ultimately it is the legislature that is the guardian of the public purse in any country. The money does not belong to anyone but to the people, and for that the legislature is supposed to be guarding it. But the biggest problem is that, let us say, if the government spends some money as per a budget which has been approved by the parliament, whether the government has actually spent that money or not, or whether it is only claiming that it has spent that money, or whether that money has been spent on the purpose for which it was allocated. Money was spent for something and you ended up spending it on advertisements. Money was supposed to be spent for defense expenditure, you ended up spending it for making roads or for making lavish accommodation for yourself. Money was supposed to be given to you for the procurement of the arms and ammunition, you spent it on advertisements of the government. So whatever be the case, there one is that the government may make a fool of the legislature by telling that we have spent the money even though they may actually not have spent the money. And the second is that the government may have spent the money on a purpose for which it was not allocated. Or thirdly, the government may have spent the money by that government department or ministry to which that money was never allocated in the first place. Money may have been allocated to Ministry of Defense, it may have been spent by Ministry of Education. And the problem is that when the government gives these accounts to the legislature to keep, so government can always tell the legislature, okay, here are the accounts of the government, why don't you tell us by looking into these accounts if there is anything wrong. The legislature does not, one, have the expertise on these matters, and secondly, nor does it have that much amount of time to be able to go through these accounts and expense etc records provided by the government. So it can be very easily the government can fool the legislature and via them the people of the country over how the expenditure has been made by the government in the country. And that is why the office of the CAG is required. The legislature needs some technical person and a battery of these individuals, those who would help the legislature in ensuring the accountability of the executive in the financial domain. That is what the office of the CAG is supposed to do. So CAG of India, he is calling it as the most important officer under the constitution, because CAG essentially would provide inputs to the Parliament of India, would provide inputs to the legislature with respect to how it should hold the executive accountable, how it should hold the executive responsible for the money that has been spent by the executive. तो financial matters के अंदर एग्जीक्यूटिव की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी अकाउंटेबिलिटी इंश्योर करने में सीएजी कंट्रोलर एंड ऑडिटर जनरल का एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रोल होता है, बिकॉज ही इज द वन हु एक्ट्स एज व्हाट वी कॉल एज द फ्रेंड, philosopher and the guide for the Parliament of India to hold the executive accountable in the financial matters or in the financial domain. So that is what we need to understand, why the office of the CAG is so important. So CAG karta kya hai? Let us broadly discuss that. The Comptroller and the Auditor General of India is supposed to prepare first the audit report. सबसे important काम है CAG का audit reports बनाना on the expenditure and the revenue of the governments in India. तो गवर्नमेंट का जो भी एक्सपेंडिचर की रिसीप्ट्स हैं और रेवेन्यू की रिसीप्ट्स हैं उनका ऑडिट करना ये सीएजी का काम होता है. इफ यू सी, एक्सपेंडिचर का मतलब ये कि क्या पैसा सही से खर्च किया गया, क्या पैसा उस पर्पस पे खर्च किया गया जिसके लिए ये खर्च करना जाना था. Was this money allocated in the first place, which has been spent by the government? Has it been spent by that authority to which it was allocated? Secondly, it is also supposed to look into the revenue receipts also, which is that जो पैसा गवर्नमेंट के पास आया है टैक्स के थ्रू and all of those sources, whether actually what the government is claiming that it has received in the treasury is what it collected. ऐसा तो नहीं है कि टैक्स के थ्रू पैसा ज्यादा आया but the government has shown it lesser in the accounts and the rest of the funds have been embezzled by some politician, by a minister or a bureaucrat. So that is what the CAG is supposed to do. That is, he is supposed to make audit reports on the functioning of the public sector units in India. He is supposed to make an audit report on the expenditure account of the government. He is supposed to make an audit report on the revenue account of the government. He is supposed to make an audit report on any statutory agency, that is any body which has been created by a statute or a law and where it has been given the powers and the functions to audit that particular company as well or statutory authority as well. Apart from it, so audit reports would be prepared for expenditure and revenue for the PSUs. It would be also possibly prepared for other statutory authorities as well. For the statutory authorities as well. So that is what the government is supposed to do when it comes to the audit report. Secondly, so the CAG is supposed to do. Secondly, the CAG is also supposed to compile the accounts. So जो भी accounting figures हैं या accounts हैं, it is supposed to compile the accounts as well for the union as well as for the states. Originally, that is what it was supposed to do. But in 1971, we made a change in the Comptroller and Auditor General CAG duties, performance of functions and the Conditions of Service Act, or and under this DPC Act, CAG DPC Act of 1971, we relieved the Comptroller and the Auditor General of the duty of compiling the accounts of the union government. अब वो यूनियन गवर्नमेंट्स के अकाउंट्स नहीं मेंटेन करता है, उनका डेटा और अकाउंट्स मेंटेन करने का काम सीएजी का नहीं है. दिस फंक्शन नाउ सिंस 1971 हैज बीन हैंडेड ओवर to an office called as the Comptroller and Comptroller General of Accounts in India. तो ये कंट्रोलर जनरल ऑफ अकाउंट्स को ये पावर दे दिया गया है, वेयर एज he continues to exercise this compiling of the accounts for the states in India and of course prepares the audit reports. Broadly, these are the functions that are supposed to be performed by the CAG of India, what we need to keep in mind. So let's look at some of the provisions related to the office of the CAG in India, but broadly what you need to understand is that the CAG, perhaps one of the most important constitutional offices, created under Article 148 of the Indian Constitution, Chapter 5 of Part 5, where this institution is supposed to provide inputs to the legislature so as to hold the government accountable in the financial domain. Broadly, it is supposed to prepare the audit reports on the expenditure, revenue, and the expenditure and the accounts of the PSUs, of the statutory authorities, etc. Plus, apart from that, it is also supposed to be involved in compilation of the accounts as well of the union and the states. Earlier, it used to prepare the compilation, the accounts only for the union and states both. But right now, it prepares the compilation of the accounts only for the states. And CAG does not mean that CAG is doing all of this work alone. He has an entire service, he has an entire department that is helping him in performing these functions. So the CAG basically is the head of the Indian Audits and Accounts Department. So it is the Indian Audits and the Accounts Department at whose head the CAG sits. So this Indian Audits and Account Department recruits the officers from the Indian Audits and Account Services. Now let's see what the exact functions and the provisions related to the office of the CAG in the constitution are. So it's an independent authority under the Constitution of India, at the head of the Indian Audit and the Account Department and chief guardian of public purse. It is the institution through which the accountability of the government and other public authorities to parliament and state legislature and to them, to the people, is ensured. This is an excerpt from one of the speeches made by Dr. Ambedkar, where he said that I am of the opinion that this dignitary or officer is probably the most important officer in the Constitution of India. He is the one man who is going to see that the expenses voted by the Parliament are not exceeded or varied from what has been laid down by the Parliament in the Appropriation Act passed by the Parliament of India. Now, one thing that I want to discuss before I move on to discuss the appointment and the removal of the CAG in India is that the term CAG stands for Comptroller and Auditor General of India. But here we have seen that he is only largely performing auditing functions. What is a comptroller function? So a comptroller function is what is performed by the CAG in UK. We know that not even a single penny can be spent in India without the approval of the Parliament or the legislature. Same goes in UK as well. But there is one more provision. When the money is actually taken out of treasury, देखिए एक तो इंडिया में क्या होता है कि पैसा खर्च करने से पहले आपको गवर्नमेंट को बजट के थ्रू पार्लियामेंट या लेजिस्लेचर का अप्रूवल लेना होता है, स्टेट लेजिस्लेचर का अप्रूवल लेना होता है. पर जब आप पैसा निकालते हैं, एक बार पार्लियामेंट से अप्रूवल मिल गया, देन एट दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम यू डोंट नीड टू टेक एनी काइंड ऑफ परमिशन और अप्रूवल फ्रॉम दी सीएजी. फिर ये कंप्लीटली एग्जीक्यूटिव डोमेन में बात आ जाती है. In case of Britain, the Comptroller and the Auditor General not only performs auditing functions but performs comptroller functions as well, which means that when any single penny is taken out of the government treasury, is taken out of the government account, once the approval from the Parliament has been taken, even at that point of time, the CAG needs to provide approval. तो ये सीएजी को अप्रूव करना होता है कि हाँ ये पैसा पार्लियामेंट सैंक्शन कर चुकी है इस पर्टिकुलर स्कीम या प्रोग्राम के लिए और इस पैसे को डिसबर्स किया जा सकता है गवर्नमेंट ट्रेजरी या लोन से. इन इंडिया द सीएजी डज नॉट परफॉर्म दिस कंट्रोलर फंक्शन. तो हमने नाम में तो कंट्रोलर एंड ऑडिटर जनरल यूके से उठा के लिख लिया, बट द कंट्रोलर फंक्शंस आर नॉट सपोज्ड टू बी परफॉर्म्ड बाय द सीएजी इन इंडिया. He does not verify or does not have a signing authority on finally when the money will be actually withdrawn out of the consolidated fund by the government. So the difference between Indian and UK CAG is what has been mentioned here. In India, unlike the UK, the CAG does not perform the comptroller functions but rather only does the auditing function. UK, any money withdrawn out of consolidated fund should be approved compulsorily by the CAG. In India, the CAG audits the accounts after the expenditure is committed. एक बार जब पैसा खर्च हो जाता है, उसके बाद कंट्रोलर इसको जो है वो इसके ऊपर चेक रखता है. Whereas in India, the CAG is in UK, the CAG is supposed to do it before even the money is taken out by the government from the treasury. In India, the CAG is not a member of the parliament. while in Britain CAG is a member of the House of Commons. See, this also explains why in Britain the CAG has been given such extraordinary powers, because while being a member of the parliament, he ensures that whatever money that is being taken out from the treasury is taken after his approval only. In India, when a democratically elected parliament has given its approval, then what is the role of the CAG, who is an appointed officer there, to be deciding whether money should be given to the government or not? अगर इंडिया में भी सीएजी हाउस ऑफ कॉमन्स का पार्ट होता जैसे ब्रिटेन के अंदर है, तो ठीक है, चले मान लिया जाता कि वो लेजिस्लेचर के बिहाफ पे साइन कर रहा है कि अच्छा आप ये पैसे निकाल लीजिएगा. इंडिया में लेजिस्लेचर ऑलरेडी अप्रूवल दे चुकी है, तो फिर सीएजी कौन होता है? वो तो केवल एक गवर्नमेंट अपॉइंटेड ऑफिसर है, तो उसके पास इतनी पावर्स नहीं होनी चाहिए कि अगर पार्लियामेंट ऑलरेडी अप्रूव कर चुकी है तो गवर्नमेंट को पैसा नहीं मिलेगा, राइट? सो दैट इज वाई there is a difference between the position of the CAG in India and in UK. Very important comparison that you need to keep in mind. Now let's talk about the appointment as well as the removal proceedings for the office of the CAG in India. As far as the appointment is concerned, the CAG is appointed by the President of India by a warrant issued under his hand and seal. We know what is the meaning of this term. It means that it is the order issued by the President that results in the appointment of the CAG in India. Now, this basically means that the ultimate decision with respect to who the CAG of India shall be is that of the Council of Ministers, Union Council of Ministers, because the President would act on the advice of the Union Council of Ministers, right? So that is first thing that we need to keep in mind. Secondly, the CAG holds the office for a period of 6 years or up to the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier. So दूसरा important criteria ये है that a CAG will only hold the office up till the age of 65 years, or if he reaches the age of the office tenure of 6 years before completing the age of 65 years, or vice versa. Third is he can resign at any time from his office by addressing the resignation letter to the President of India. तो वो किसी भी समय पे President of India को अपना resignation letter हैंड ओवर करके अपनी पोजीशन से रिजाइन कर सकता है. एंड देन ही कैन ऑल्सो बी रिमूव्ड बाय द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया, बट इन द सेम वे एंड इन द सेम मैनर एज अ जज ऑफ द सुप्रीम कोर्ट ऑफ इंडिया इज सपोज टू बी रिमूव्ड. This ensures the independence of the office of the CAG. It is very important to ensure the independence of the office of this office. And how we do that? That the removal is in the same manner as a judge of the Supreme Court of India, apart from the resignation. In other words, he can be removed by President on the basis of a resolution passed to that effect by both the houses of the Parliament with a special majority, either on the grounds of proven misbehavior or incapacity, because the manner of removal is the same as that of a judge of the Supreme Court of India in case of CAG. Now, how do we ensure, therefore, अब हमें broadly एक idea लग गया है that the office of the CAG is supposed to help the Parliament in holding the government accountable, which means that the CAG should be free from the influence of the executive. So, what are some of the provisions that exist in the Indian Constitution to ensure the independence of the office? First is, the CAG is provided a fixed tenure of 6 years, of 65 years, whichever is earlier. This helps in ensuring that a person is not living under a constant fear or a threat in his mind, that if I say something adverse of the government, I will be removed from this position. The second and an important fact is that he is also ineligible to hold any office, any public office, any government office, either under the government of India or any state, once that person resigns as a CAG. So there are no prospects for post-retirement employment as far as the CAG is concerned. Thirdly, his salary, his appointment conditions, service tenure, all of these things cannot be varied to his disadvantage after his appointment. तो एक बार CAG का appointment हो जाए, जिस salary पे, जिस allowances पे, जिस conditions पे उसको recruit किया गया है, they cannot be changed after the appointment has been done. Then another thing is that his administrative powers and conditions of service of the Indian audits and account services are supposed to be determined by the CAG only. तो जो CAG के office जिसको वो हेड करता है, जिस डिपार्टमेंट को, इंडियन ऑडिट्स एंड अकाउंट डिपार्टमेंट, इंडियन ऑडिट्स एंड अकाउंट सर्विसेज, उसके जो भी ऑफिसर्स हैं, उनकी कंडीशंस ऑफ सर्विस, उनका अपॉइंटमेंट, टर्मिनेशन एंड अ होल लॉट ऑफ अदर थिंग्स आर इन द हैंड्स ऑफ द सीएजी सो एज टू मेंटेन द इंडिपेंडेंस ऑफ हिज एंटायर डिपार्टमेंट. देन it also says that the the removal of the persons, the conditions of their office are also determined only after the President of India has consulted him. Then the administrative expenses of the office of the CAG, according to Article 112 Clause 3, the salaries, allowances, etc. are a charged expenditure on the consolidated fund of India, which means that there is no vote that takes place in the parliament on these particular expenditure, right? So as to keep him free from any kind of politicization. So these are the reasons, or these are the provisions in the Indian constitution through which the independence of the office of the CAG is maintained in India. Now, what are the duties and the powers of the CAG? The constitution says that the duties and the powers of the CAG's office shall be determined according to a law made by the Parliament of India. For this purpose, as I said, the Parliament of India has enacted a law called as the CAG in bracket Duties, Powers and Conditions of Service Act of 1971. Now, as per Article 149, the Parliament has enacted the CAG Act that describes the powers and the duties to be performed by his office. What are they? He audits the receipts and the expenditure from the Consolidated Fund of India. He is supposed to audit the transactions related to contingency fund as well as to the public account funds. He audits all the government companies and central PSUs, but see, he doesn't audit all the government companies and central PSUs. He does it for only a limited number of them, but he can do, is what you need to understand. He audits all the autonomous bodies and authorities receiving government funds as well. That also he has the powers to audit. He can audit the accounts of any other authority at the request of the president. He is supposed to assess the proceeds of the taxes, whether the taxes have been collected as they were supposed to be, whether they have been collected efficiently or not, etc. He is also acting as an agent of the parliament and conducts an expenditure audit on their behalf. तो जो भी पैसा गवर्नमेंट ने खर्च किया है उसकी ऑडिट रिपोर्ट सीएजी प्रेसिडेंट को हैंड ओवर कर देता है. प्रेसिडेंट कॉजेज दैट रिपोर्ट टू बी लेड डाउन इन फ्रंट ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट. जब पार्लियामेंट के सामने ये रिपोर्ट आती है तो वो खुद से एग्जामिन नहीं करती सीएजी की रिपोर्ट. देयर इज अ 22 मेंबर कमिटी ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट कॉल्ड एज द पब्लिक अकाउंट्स कमिटी. उसको सीएजी की रिपोर्ट थमा दी जाती है. दे आर हैंडेड ओवर द सीएजी रिपोर्ट. बट अब for the PSC, it is literally like kala akshar bhais barabar, and so because that report of the CAG is a very technical document, how is the public accounts committee that is supposed to consist of laymen parliamentarians going to examine that particular report of CAG? And that is where the CAG again comes in. So CAG not only acts as a philosopher for the public accounts committee, क्योंकि पब्लिक अकाउंट्स कमेटी का काम यह है कि गवर्नमेंट ने जो भी एक्सपेंडिचर किया है वो सही से किया है कि नहीं किया है. वो किसके बेसिस पे चलेगा? सीएजी की रिपोर्ट के बेसिस पे. तो ही इज द फिलोसोफर, बट ही इज ऑल्सो द फ्रेंड एंड द गाइड ऑफ द पीएससी, बिकॉज द पीएससी डज नॉट एंजॉय टेक्निकल एक्सपर्टीज ऑफ इट्स ओन. The PSC does not necessarily have CAs in its members. So therefore it needs the help of the CAG in order to decipher that report, in order to conduct an inquiry of the government officials, ministers, etc., ask questions of them, and on the basis of that, the PSC prepares its reports on certain sections of CAG's report, and that becomes a talking point in the parliament, because PSC's report is then finally tabled in the parliament, और जिसके basis के ऊपर parliament में एक serious discussion किया जाता है. So that is what we need to keep in mind. I'll just come to that in a bit. And he ensures the accountability of the executive to the legislature in the financial administration. Of course he does. And he checks the legality of the funds shown in the account have been dispersed properly to the specific body, etc., and all of those things. So that is what the CAG is supposed to do. So now there are two types of audits that are primarily performed by the CAG in India. देखिए, एक तो क्या है, that you can categorize these audits on the basis of किसको audit कर रहा है, एक्सपेंडिचर अकाउंट को, रेवेन्यू अकाउंट को, पीएसयूज को, एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट. बट अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट the CAG's audit can be classified into two categories as follows. सीएजी के ऑडिट को दो कैटेगरीज में हम डिवाइड कर सकते हैं. एक ऑडिट होता है जिसको हम कंप्लायंस ऑडिट कहते हैं सीएजी का, जो कि सबसे बेसिक ऑडिट सीएजी परफॉर्म करता है. एंड सेकेंडली, द सीएजी इज ऑल्सो सपोज टू परफॉर्म what we call as the propriety audit, or what we also call as nowadays the performance audit. So what is the difference between a compliance audit and a propriety or a performance audit? So you first write down what is there in a compliance audit, what all the CAG is supposed to do in a compliance audit. Please write down. He has to check whether the expenditure made by the government, was allocated by the government or was allocated by the legislature or not. Whether the expenditure made by the government was allocated by the legislature or not. जो पैसा गवर्नमेंट ने खर्च किया है, क्या वो उनको allocate किया भी गया था कि नहीं. Second, please write down. Whether the money was spent by the authority to whom it was allocated. Whether the money was spent by the authority to whom it was allocated. And lastly, whether the money was spent on the purpose for which it was allocated. For which it was allocated. For which it was allocated. So basically the point which you need to understand is that the CAG in his audit, one is supposed to look into the compliance part, whether that has been made by the government properly or not. But the CAG, apart from this compliance audit, is also supposed to look into, and what it has started to do in the recent times, to look into the performance audit as well. That is, whether the money that was spent by the government was spent as per the 3 E's or not, which is whether the money was spent by the government economically, which is कि अगर जो काम गवर्नमेंट ने 50 करोड़ लगाकर किया है, was there a cheaper way to get that work done? Was there a more economical way to get that work done? Secondly, it has to look into efficiency. जिस काम को करने में आपने 10 दिन लगाए, क्या वो 3 दिन में हो सकता था? जिस काम को करने के लिए आपने 100 लोग लगाए, could it have been done with 10 people or 50 people? This is what is called as efficiency. And third is they have to look into effectivity. Whether the option that was taken by the government with respect to that particular problem was the most effective one or not. See, for example, if you are the secretary of the finance ministry, you have to decide that we have to alleviate poverty in India. There are multiple ways to remove poverty or to reduce poverty. One is by introducing a revamped PDS system. The other one is by providing direct benefit transfer to the people. The third one is by providing employment to people. The fourth one is by setting up small industries so that people themselves become self-employable and they have their own employment. There are multiple ways. Which one was the most effective way through which you could have achieved the maximum output with minimum number of resources? So all these things are also looked into by the CAG in what we call as the performance audit, which is performed by the CAG these days. So you please write down. Apart from the compliance audit, the CAG has to look through the lens of three E's. Which is economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. Economy, efficiency, and effectiveness. As a part of its traditional role, the CAG is not supposed to perform the performance audit. But in the recent times it has tapped into its constitutional and legal powers. To perform such audits as well. Such an audit by the CAG has helped in keeping a check on wasteful expenditure made by the government agencies. So we will have a look at that, but now we understand that CAG is supposed to prepare audit reports on the various kind of expenditure, revenue accounts and expenses made by the government companies, statutory authorities, PSUs, etc. And we have also discussed very briefly that how the CAG is supposed to act as a friend, philosopher and the guide of the Public Accounts Committee in helping them with respect to financial accountability of the government. So let us discuss, you can give the heading, relationship between the CAG and PAC. रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन सीएजी एंड पीएससी. पहले बात तो ये समझिएगा, पब्लिक अकाउंट्स कमिटी ऑफ द पार्लियामेंट consists of 22 members. 15 of them are from the Lok Sabha, 7 are from the Rajya Sabha. All these 22 members of the Public Accounts Committee are chosen by or are elected by the members of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. The chairperson of the Public Accounts Committee is supposed to be chosen by the presiding officer of Lok Sabha, and usually in case of the PAC, the chairperson, a convention that we have been following, is from the opposition parties. ऑपोजिशन का मेंबर होता है पीएसी का चेयरपर्सन. एंड नो मिनिस्टर कैन बी अ मेंबर ऑफ द पब्लिक अकाउंट्स कमिटी. If a person who is a member of Public Accounts Committee is appointed as a minister, then he should resign from the membership of the Public Accounts Committee. Now, let's talk about what the relationship between the CAG and the PAC is. You please write down, we will discuss it simultaneously. The CAG is supposed to prepare detailed reports and submit them to the president. The CAG is supposed to prepare detailed reports and submit them to the president or the governor, अगर वो स्टेट की रिपोर्ट्स हैं, or the governor, who in turn shall cause them to be laid. Who in turn shall cause them to be laid in front of the legislature. In front of the legislature. The reports of the CAG, are subsequently handed over to the PAC. The reports of the CAG are subsequently handed over to the PAC, which examines these reports. With the help of the CAG. The PAC specifically examines the reports of the CAG. The PAC specifically examines the reports of the CAG on appropriation accounts, revenue receipts, and expenditure reports. and expenditure reports of various departments and ministries. And expenditure reports of various departments and ministries. The PAC in its examination process may even question the government officers and ministers with respect to the expenditure made by the government. With respect to the expenditure made by the government. तो CAG ने रिपोर्ट बनाई, handed over to president. President is going to lay these reports in front of the Parliament of India, causing them to be laid in front of Parliament of India. Parliament shall hand over these reports to the PAC. PAC will examine these reports now, not the entire report of the CAG, but some sections of them in detail. With the help of the CAG, also call various government officers, minister as witnesses and ask them for information while preparing its reports, and then finally prepare its reports on the expenditure and a whole lot of other things made by the government of India. This report is then tabled in the parliament and becomes a talking point for the opposition to hold the government accountable. So you please write down, the CAG assists the committee in questioning the witnesses. The CAG assists the committee in questioning the witnesses and understanding the technicalities of the audit report. And understanding the technicalities of the audit report. Not only that, the CAG also examines whether the recommendations made by him in the reports, have been accepted or not by the government. Recommendations made by him in the report have been accepted or not by the government, and reports the same to the PAC. Therefore, the PAC gets empowered. To question the executive. To question the executive. In an effective manner. So that is as far as the functioning of the PAC and the CAG is concerned, and how they work in tandem with each other to ensure the executive accountability in financial domain to the legislature or to the parliament. But often people say that firstly, CAG's reports are a post-mortem analysis. Once the money has been spent, the government has made the expenditure, that is when the CAG goes and conducts that analysis on the expenditure made by the government and submits the audit report. The second is that they say that CAG's reports are not binding on the governments. Even if, let's say, CAG has found some problem in the expenditure made by the government, what he can do at the max is bring that to the notice of the people of the country through his audit report and help the PAC in holding a further detailed analysis. But nothing more than that. Even the reports of the PAC are not really binding on the government. इससे कुछ होगा नहीं. अगर कुछ गलत हुआ भी होगा तो अलग से एक केस फाइल होगा and CBI inquiry and this and that and all of those things will happen. But CAG and PAC report otherwise do not do anything. That's why a lot of people say that CAG is a watchdog which does not bite but only barks. So it only goes and barks but does not really do anything. The recommendations are not really making any impact as such. But on this, some people say that even to have a watchdog which barks and not bites is enough at times. Especially, let's say if you have a dog at your house who does not necessarily bite the strangers or the thieves, but even barks and lets you know that there is someone suspicious who's entering into your house, at least you would get cautious. At least you would start being more cautious, or you would start observing things, or you would try to prepare yourself for something wrong that is happening in your house. Same goes for the CAG as well. Even though it may not bite, but its reports can send tremor waves across the government. It can become a talking point for people in the country. It can become a point for the media to hold the government accountable. It can become a point for the opposition to hold the government accountable in the parliament and outside as well. So therefore, the utility of the CAG's office cannot be missed. We must not forget that the Bofors scandal, the Bofors scam, where we had procured these howitzer machines, Bofors, there was an allegation that the government has procured these Bofors machines at a much higher cost as compared to what they were available for. And the reason for that is because there was a quid pro quo that had happened between the supplier and some of the government officers and the ministers. Those who were going to receive a portion of this high cost, and a portion would be kept by the manufacturer, what we call as kickbacks, which are got taken in the scams, in defense procurement deals, etc. Similarly, in CWG games, in 2G allocation as well, it was the CAG report that brought the attention of the country to something wrong that was done by the government during these two events, right? So whether it is the 2G spectrum allocation, or when we look at the CWG games as well, the CWG report of the CAG, the audit report prepared by CAG, was very critical of how the entire CWG planning and the execution had been done by the government. You see, a toilet roll, which is used in toilet, the toilet paper roll, usually it would not cost more than 50 to 100 rupees, right? I may be exaggerating when I am saying 100 rupees, but it usually would be nothing more than 50 rupees a toilet roll. In CWG games, the toilet rolls which had been procured by the government were as costly as 2,000 to 5,000 rupees per toilet roll. That is the amount of money that was spent on procurement of toilet rolls in CWG games. So either these toilet rolls, they had something very special, चांदी का वर्क लगा हुआ था या तो in toilet rolls के ऊपर, or they were automatic toilet rolls that you walk into the toilet and then you do your thing, and then after that the toilet roll would do the cleaning up job itself. Either they were such greatly manufactured automatic toilet rolls, or there was a scam. So you guess what was the case. In any case, these were the kind of observations which were made by the CAG's report, which helped in highlighting how there was a massive misuse of public money that was made during the CWG games by the government. So one cannot deny that CAG's office plays a very important role in exposing the wrongdoings and the corrupt act by the government in India. Some of the things have been mentioned here. What is the significance of CAG's office? He is the friend, philosopher and the guide of the PSC and provides them with the necessary technical inputs to hold the government accountable. In recent past, CAG has played an important role in unearthing some of the major scams in the country. You can give example of the Bofors scam or the 2G scam or the CWG scam. Even recently, the reports that have come out of the CAG with respect to the money which has been spent under some of the government schemes is again an example of how CAG can indeed create awareness on how the government has spent the funds which are actually supposed to be spent in a very cautious manner. CAG looks at the material in front of it to ascertain whether relevant factors were taken into consideration to reach a policy decision. So CAG also ensures that whatever policy decisions were taken by the government, were they arbitrary in nature, were they whimsical in nature, or was there any analysis, was there any number crunching, was there any specific analysis that was performed by the government department while reaching that particular policy decision. And lastly, above all, it ensures that the principles of constitution and the law are complied by the executive agencies in India. So those are some of the points which you can talk about as far as the importance of the CAG is concerned. But the CAG itself has a number of shortcomings in the way it functions. So you please write down issues or challenges or shortcomings associated with the office of the CAG. One of the students is asking that wouldn't it be more effective that if only opposition members were in the PSC? Possibly yes, but see, you must understand one thing. We at least in theory assume that a legislator, as long as he is not a minister, would always perform his duty as a legislator first and the member of the ruling party later. At least theory में तो यही है. हाँ, आपकी बात बिल्कुल ठीक है कि जो हमारे यहाँ पे पार्टी सिस्टम जैसा हमने क्रिएट कर दिया है, वहां पे a ruling party member would not be questioning the government. But ideally that is not what it is supposed to be. That is not how it is supposed to function. Remember Feroz Gandhi questioning the finance minister on the Mundra scam and then the entire information coming out in public domain. So we expect parliamentarians to rise above party politics, especially the legislators to rise above party politics. They are representing people of the country. They are not representing political parties. But it is very unfortunate that today the members of parliament, the members of state legislatures as well, are more loyal to their political party than they are to their voter base. They have taken the voters for granted. They don't really care about what the voter thinks or what they don't, because they know that voters are foolish. They can always be fooled towards the close to the elections in the name of religion, in the name of caste, by giving them money, by promising them freebies. You can always get the voter to vote for you. Right? That is the truth. We need to accept that. It is ultimately the voter who has been taken for granted by the governments and by the political parties. And for that, the voter only is to be blamed for. You can't be blaming the political parties for that, because political parties will do what best serves their interest. Voters should see what best serves their interest, but they don't. Then what can be done in that case? Anyway, now let's talk about shortcomings which are there in the functioning of the office of the CAG. First, please write down the appointment procedure of the CAG. The appointment procedure of the CAG lacks independence. The appointment procedure of the CAG lacks independence. So there is always a possibility that the person who will be appointed to the office of the CAG will be a loyalist of the ruling party and therefore would not want to be publishing or writing reports which are critical of the government that is in power. right? And that is what I have mentioned here as well as the first point, that the appointment is made by the president on the aid and the advice of council of ministers. Ideally, the appointment of the CAG should be done by a collegium like of a body which should consist of leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha, possibly the Chief Justice of India and a few other important functionaries under the constitution. Next, please write down. The CAG is usually not interested in the audit of private companies. The CAG is usually not interested in the audit of the private companies involved in the delivery of public services. Involved in the delivery of public services. Involved in the delivery of public services. So, there are a lot of private companies today which have entered into delivery of public services, and ideally they should also be scrutinized, they should also be audited. That are they overcharging the citizens? Are they providing the services properly? Is there any embezzlement of funds which is happening? Have they been provided any funds by the government which they have misused? But unfortunately, the CAG seems reluctant to audit these private companies, even though it is well within the powers of the CAG to do so. Next, please write down. It is an overburdened institution. It is an overburdened institution considering the complicated state of finances. Considering the complicated state of finances of the government in present times. Considering the complicated state of finances of the government in present times. तो गवर्नमेंट का काम इतना बढ़ गया है, governance has become so complicated today that it has almost become next to impossible for the CAG to be auditing all the accounts of the government. And the office is severely overburdened, not just because that there is only one person who is occupying the office of the CAG, but even the entire department itself is overburdened and understaffed. Next, please write down. Often the IAS officers are given preference over. Often the IAS officers are given the preference over IAAS officers. IAAS officers who have specific domain expertise. Who have specific domain expertise and should be given priority for such positions. And should be given priorities for such positions. In case of the CAG's office, we see that often it is a senior IAS officer who is appointed as the CAG of India. Now, Indian audits and account services are no less when it comes to the kind of function that is supposed to be performed by the CAG. So why is it that an Indian audits and account services officer is never appointed as the CAG, but only maximum rises up to the position of the deputy CAG in India? Now this creates three kind of problems. One is when you get an outsider into the department, an IAS into the department to head that particular department, it can have a severely demoralizing effect on the others within the department, because when you know that despite whatever you do, however hard you work, you will never be able to head your organization one day, because a person who secured more marks than you in an examination 30 years back would be given preference over you simply because of the service to which that person belongs, is going to have a definitely demotivating effect on your psychology, on you. So that is one thing that we need to understand as far as getting an IAS officer into the CAG and to be heading the Indian audits and the accounts departments is concerned. The second is that you are losing out on the expertise as well. See, An IAS officer, of course, has a great amount of experience and has a great body of experience with respect to the work that has been done by that individual. But at the same time, an IAS officer has spent his entire life, entire professional career in that department, and that person has a great amount of knowledge about the functioning of the audits and accounts of the government. And ideally, that person is the fittest person to be heading the department. So, by getting a generalist into the position of the CAG, you are discounting the fact that expertise has an important role to play. Some people say that IAS officers lack the on-ground experience. They do not really understand the policy making on ground, which may be true to a certain extent. But then, ideally, in that case, you can possibly be sending some of these IAS officers on deputation to the state governments. You could be sending them on certain stints on ground as well, so that they get an idea during their entire course of service, and towards the later stage of their career, they can go on to head their department as well. Next, please write down. It is often criticized that CAG has the benefit of hindsight. CAG has the benefit of hindsight. That is not available to the policy makers. Therefore, overly critical reports of CAG may have detrimental effect on the functioning of the civil services, often resulting in a policy paralysis. Now, there is something called as the hindsight bias, from which we all human beings suffer. This hindsight bias is that once we see an outcome or a result, after that we have comments to make over what was done was right or wrong. If there is success, then we believe that whatever that person must have done must have been correct. And if there is failure, then we believe that whatever that person must have done must have been wrong. Right? So, from yesterday till today and for a few days now, you will find these fly-by-night cricket experts, those who will come up, जिन्होंने जिंदगी में ढंग से अपने हाथ में बल्ला नहीं पकड़ा होगा, वो कमेंट करते फिरेंगे कि विराट कोहली को ऐसे बैटिंग करनी थी और वैसे बैटिंग करनी थी. मैं सुन भी रहा था, है ना, लॉट ऑफ पीपल, एवरीवन हैज देयर कमेंट्स. कई बार अब मैं किसी को बोल दूं कि तुम जाके खेल लो, तो उनको बुरी लग जाती है बात. दे फील बैड अबाउट इट कि ये कैसा लॉजिक है, ये कैसी बात है बोलने की. बिकॉज अब जब आप बेतुकी बात करेंगे तो मैं यही बोलूंगा आपको कि आप जाके खुद खेल के देखिए एक बार. जस्ट गो एंड प्ले ऑन अ क्रिकेट ग्राउंड वंस एंड टेल मी हाउ इजी और डिफिकल्ट इट इज. हाउ डू यू कॉमेंट ऑन देयर इज. आप सोच के देखिए ना, एक आदमी ने 50,000 रन बना दिए, जितना भी कुछ भी इंटरनेशनल क्रिकेट में, आप उसको बता रहे हैं कि नहीं, अरे ये कैसे खेल रहे हो तुम, है ना, यू आर प्लेइंग लाइक दिस. सेम इज विद द पॉलिसी मेकिंग एज वेल. जब पॉलिसी मेकिंग के अंदर, see when you are making policies you don't really know what the outcome of that policy is going to be. A lot of times when you will be a civil servant, you would have policy decisions to make, whether to go for policy option A or B or C or D. And you may often make mistakes as well, because again, to err is human, right? Now, I always say कि इंसान आदमी जो है वो गलतियों का पुतला है और कुछ नहीं है ना. So human being is made of all the flaws only ultimately. So you make mistakes and that is how you learn. और ऐसा नहीं है कि इंडिया के अंदर ही केवल पॉलिसी मेकर्स मेक मिस्टेक्स, अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड पीपल मेक मिस्टेक्स. अकॉर्डिंग द and the Indian policy makers are no different from that. Now there is a problem. The problem is that when you make policies, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. What if the policy turns out to be a failure? आप किसी फेल्ड पॉलिसी को देख के तो बता सकते हैं कि हाँ ये गलत किया, वो गलत किया एंड ऑल ऑफ दैट, एंड ऐसे छक्का मारना था या ऐसे चौका मारना था. बट when you are in that position, when you don't know what the outcome is going to be, at that point of time, it is very difficult to decide what is correct or what is wrong. That is what you need to understand, is the issue associated with policy making is. You know? So it's just like sport, or it's just like any other thing in life. Some people always have the benefit of the hindsight. CAG के पास ये benefit होता है hindsight का. जब पॉलिसी बन चुकी, वो इंप्लीमेंट हो चुकी, उसका आउटकम आ चुका, तो वो उस पर देख के कमेंट्री कर सकता है कि हाँ ये तो गलत किया. But at that point of time when the decision had to be taken, it is not always easy. It is very difficult to reach the correct decision. That is what we need to understand. So, a lot of times CAG is very critical in the comments and the observations that he makes on his audit report, in his audit reports with respect to policy decisions taken by the government, which can create a few problems. What are those problems? It can result in a situation where the CAG, because of the benefit of the hindsight, may become overly critical of the policies of the government and bureaucrats who do not have that benefit of hindsight कि ये काम करेगा कि नहीं करेगा. और अगर गलत हो जाए तो then the CAG will come running after your life, which makes a problem, because in future no one would take a decision which would be risky and which would mean what we call as policy paralysis. एक simple सा example दूं. Some people are saying that Rohit Sharma should not have gone for trying to hit another 6 in that over. It was foolish on his part. 10 रन आ गए थे, क्यों मारा? ठीक है, आउट हो गया, देखा मैंने बोला था नहीं करना था. वही बेवकूफ लोगों से आप जाके पूछें तो वो बोलेंगे कि विराट कोहली इतने सारी बॉलें खेल गया बीच में, उसने एक बार भी मारने की कोशिश नहीं करी, मारता होता आउट हो जाता तो तुम फिर उसको भी यही बोलते. यही है हाइंडसाइट का बेनिफिट, हाइंडसाइट बायस, which all of us human beings suffer from. That's why I always tell that you people should read this book called as Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow, written by Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman. If you read that, you will understand there are so many biases that we human beings have, and that it's very difficult to overcome those biases. You have to make a conscious effort to overcome those biases in your mind, because our intrinsic thinking is full of biases, is full of flaws, and we think that we are correct in our thinking. Same is with the CAG's office as well. 2G for example, 2G report के अंदर CAG ने अपनी रिपोर्ट में ये बोला, there has been a massive loss that has occurred to the exchequer which amounts to 1.76 lakh crores. Where his point of view was, उसने क्या देखा, 3G की स्पेक्ट्रम की एलोकेशन देखी पहले. He said कि भाई इतना प्रॉफिट हुआ है गवर्नमेंट को 3G स्पेक्ट्रम एलोकेशन में, इसके अंदर प्रॉपर तरीके से बिडिंग करके एलोकेशन किया गया तो सरकार को इतना सारा पैसा मिला. तो then he went back to 2G spectrum allocation. Then he thought, in 2G why did government not go for bidding of the spectrum? Why did they go for first come first serve basis? Right? Why did they go for first come first serve basis and not for the 3G spectrum allocation method, which was through bidding process? Now, on the basis of that, he said कि government को loss हुआ है. Why? बिकॉज अगर 3G में इतना पैसा आया तो 2G में भी इतना ही पैसा आना चाहिए था, एंड दैट इज वाई सो मच लॉस हैज अकर्ड. बट सी, दिस इज नोशनल लॉस if you look at it. Why? Because you have failed to take into account that when 2G spectrum bidding or allocation happened, at that point of time in India, there were very few people, those who were willing to invest in 2G. And there were not many companies, those who wanted to do that. And that is why there was first come first serve policy which had to be adopted by the government कि भाई जो आके ले ले वो ले जाए इसको. And 3G तक आते आते, by that time there was so much mobile telephony in India, the mobile phones had become such a rampage in India that everyone wanted कि 3G का कुछ spectrum मिल जाए because we will make profits out of it. That's why companies were willing to spend more in 3G spectrum allocation as compared to what they were wanting to do in 2G. तो गवर्नमेंट की पॉलिसी 2G और 3G एलोकेशन के लिए डिफरेंट थी. नो वन इज डिनाइंग देयर मे हैव बीन क्विड प्रो क्यो, देयर मे हैव बीन करप्शन, बट टू से दैट 1.76 लाख करोड़ लॉस हैपेंड in itself is very foolish thing to say. Why? Again, because the CAG has the benefit of the hindsight. तो वो अब बोल सकता है कि ये तुमने गलत किया, बट उस समय गवर्नमेंट को वही बेस्ट ऑप्शन दिखा. दूसरी बात ये, गवर्नमेंट हैड टू अप्रोचेस. In 2G, the government's approach was कि जितना ज्यादा टेलीफोन देश में स्प्रेड हो सके, मोबाइल फोन स्प्रेड हो सके, फॉर दैट वी नीड टू कीप द प्राइसेस ऑफ मोबाइल rates, data rates, etc. as low as possible. And for that, we will have to provide this spectrum to the companies at a cheaper rate. But by the time it was 3G, already mobile phone had penetrated India. So the government was not really worried about the rates, because see, if a company is going to bid high rate for 2G spectrum, वो अपनी जेब से तो पैसा नहीं देगा. He will ultimately be charging that from the consumer. कंज्यूमर से ज्यादा रेट चार्ज करेगा तो इंडिया जैसी कंट्री के अंदर पीपल आर नॉट गोइंग टू अवेल ऑफ द मोबाइल टेलीफोन. पीपल विल स्टिक टू देयर लैंडलाइंस एक्सेट्रा. वी वांटेड पीपल टू मूव टू मोबाइल टेलीफोन. दैट इज व्हाई वी वांटेड टू कीप द कॉल रेट्स लोअर, एंड दैट इज व्हाई द स्पेक्ट्रम एलोकेशन हैपेंड एट लोअर रेट्स. बट बाय द टाइम वी रीच 3G, द सिचुएशन इन द मार्केट हैड कंप्लीटली चेंज्ड. नाउ सी, आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट व्हाटएवर आई एम सेइंग इज कंप्लीटली एक्यूरेट. देयर आर counter arguments also which can be made to it, and I am not denying that. But what I am trying to tell you as an example here is that CAG, by this benefit of hindsight, highlighted that there were certain scams that happened in the government. Among them 2G scam, in which 1.76 lakh crore loss happened. जब Indian Express में अगले दिन खबर आई तो उसके अंदर 1.76 लाख करोड़ के पता नहीं कितने जीरो लगा रखे थे उन्होंने. आदमी ऊपर से नीचे लेकर वो हेडलाइन ही देखता रह गया कि कितने जीरो का लॉस हुआ है. ये सारा पैसा जो है गवर्नमेंट खा गई या ये मिनिस्टर खा गए, विच इज नॉट एक्चुअली ट्रू. बट द परसेप्शन विच इट गेव वाज दिस. आफ्टर दैट अ लॉट ऑफ सिविल सर्वेंट डिसाइडेड वी आर नॉट गोइंग टू साइन ऑन एनी फाइल. व्हाई? बिकॉज करेंगे हम और भरेंगे भी हम, है ना. बिकॉज दिस पर्सन will be holding us accountable by writing a report which will say कि ये decision क्यों लिया और वो decision क्यों लिया. So let us just go into a paralysis mode, and that is what happened. 2011 to 2014, government went into a complete policy paralysis mode, stopped taking any significant decisions, because they realized that whatever that we take as a decision, there can always be a critique that can be made by this guy, which would be in the hindsight. Right? So this is another important aspect of the shortcomings of the CAG office which you need to keep in mind. तो CAG को balance करके चलना बहुत जरूरी है. He needs to understand that often policy making is done in dark. He needs to understand that often policy makers does not have the benefit of the hindsight, and policies can go wrong. If you scare the hell out of policy maker, then they will not take any risky decision going ahead in the future, which will put the entire government functioning itself into a limbo. Right? So these are some of the limitations as far as the office of the CAG and its functioning are concerned. If you read the handout, I have also mentioned what are some of the suggestions which are required to reform the functioning of the CAG. They are more or less associated with the issues that we have discussed. You please go through them on your own. You let me know if there is any issue that you feel, or if in any problem that you encounter while reading this. right? So this is as far as the office of the CAG is concerned. We'll go into a break right now. After the break, I will take up the topic of UPSC and the human rights commissions with you, and we will also discuss briefly about the union territories topic as well. What are the provisions related to Delhi, 239 AA, union territories, etc. Some of that discussion also I will do after the break. I'll see you in a few minutes. Let's discuss provisions related to the Union Public Service Commission and the State Public Service Commission. Firstly, we'll discuss what the membership of these bodies looks like. I will not be discussing all of those things in detail. We will discuss more on the analytical issues, the functioning of the UPSC, what are some of the important functions that are supposed to be performed by the UPSC, and what are some of the challenges which are associated with the functioning of the Union Public Service Commission and the State Public Service Commissions in India. So first, let's talk about what the membership of these bodies looks like. If you open up the Constitution, in provisions from Article 315 to Article 323, you will find matters related to the public service commissions have been addressed. So if you read the provisions of Article 315, it says that subject to provisions of this article, there shall be a public service commission for the union and a public service commission for each state. And then it says that 2 or more states may agree that there shall be one public service commission, for that group of states, and if a resolution to that effect is passed by the house or where there are 2 houses, by each house of legislature of each of those states, the parliament may by law provide for the appointment of a joint public service commission to serve the need of those 2 states as well. So what we need to understand is that in normal circumstances there would be a Union Public Service Commission to serve the needs of the union, and there will be a State Public Service Commission to serve the needs of the state in matters of service. But a State Public Service Commission may be set up as a joint Public Service Commission as well for 2 or more states, for 2 states, and there the 2 states would have to pass a resolution and the legislatures of the state, and then the parliament by law can set up a joint public service commission for the 2 states in India as well. So that's broadly one thing that we need to keep in mind as far as the public service commissions are concerned. Let's look into what are the functions which are supposed to be performed by the Public Service Commission first, and then we will discuss about what the membership and whole lot of other things related to these commissions is supposed to be. So let's talk about the functions which are supposed to be performed by these Public Service Commissions. I am writing down some of these functions just in brief on the board, and we will discuss them simultaneously, but if you are wanting to, you can just search on the internet, you can go on UPSC's website, you can look up your material, you can look up any of the basic textbooks also that you have, and from there as well you will be able to get an understanding of what the functions of the UPSC are. So firstly, the State Public Service Commissions and the UPSC, the Public Service Commissions in India, are supposed to conduct the competitive examinations for recruitment to various government posts. So they are involved in conducting competitive examinations for the various government jobs and posts. For example, the UPSC is supposed to be involved in conducting the UPSC Civil Services examination. It is supposed to be involved in conducting the Indian Engineering Services examination. It is supposed to be involved in conducting the examination for the Central Armed Police Forces, etc. as well. So depends, whatever recruitment that has to be made by the government, for that a number of competitive examinations are supposed to be conducted by these public service commissions. Secondly, the public service commissions are also supposed to be consulted by the government with respect to matters related to the personal management. So the government consults them for personal management related issues. So this basically means and covers a lot of things under it, which means appointments that are supposed to be made to some of the important positions and posts. The government consults the UPSC or the State Public Service Commission for the same. If there are any important transfers that are supposed to be made within the government, for that as well they take the permission or they take the consultation. If there are any promotions that are supposed to be decided of an individual within the government services, again the public service commissions are consulted by the government. And not just that, but with respect to any disciplinary action that is supposed to be taken against any public servant, the public service commissions may be consulted by the government. So that's an important function that is supposed to be performed by the public service commissions in India. Right, so that's one. Then apart from that, the state public service commissions are also supposed to be conducting the similar kind of exams, and they are also be supposed to be involved in a number of these personnel related issues as well. Then let's talk about some of the other functions that are supposed to be performed by the public service commissions. By UPSC specifically, UPSC is supposed to assist. We are specifically talking of UPSC right now. It is supposed to assist the state public service commissions with respect to personnel management, recruitment, etc. तो अगर किसी स्टेट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन को अपनी रिक्रूटमेंट स्कीम में हेल्प चाहिए हो, एग्जाम कंडक्ट करवाने के लिए, स्कीम ड्रॉ करने के लिए हेल्प चाहिए हो, there also the UPSC may provide inputs to the state public service commissions as well, right? So that's another important function that is supposed to be performed by the UPSC. Apart from it, the UPSC is supposed to be involved in submitting annual reports to the President of India on a yearly basis with respect to the functioning of the commission. So UPSC is also supposed to submit annual reports to the President with respect to the functioning of the commission as well on a time-to-time basis is another important aspect of the UPSC which we need to keep in mind, right? And then another important aspect is that the government may ask for UPSC on advice with respect to improving the recruitment or improving the service conditions of the civil servants, etc. So it may basically, the government may ask public service commissions to provide advice on related matters from time to time. So these are the functions that are supposed to be performed by the UPSC, which and the state public service commissions in India, right? You can see some of the things as well. For example, if you look at the provisions related to Article 320, you will find the functions of the public service commissions. It shall be the duty of the union and the state public service commissions to conduct examinations and appointments to the services of the union and services of the states. It shall also be the duty of UPSC, if requested by any two or more states to do, assist those states in framing and operating schemes of joint recruitment for any services. The UPSC or State Public Service Commission, as the case may be, shall be consulted on all matters related to methods of recruitment to civil services and to civil posts, on the principles to be followed in making appointments to civil services and posts, on all disciplinary matters affecting a person serving under the Government of India or Government of State in any capacity, on any claim or in respect of a person who is serving or has served under the Government of India or Government of State, etc., on costs that incurred by him in defending legal proceedings instituted against him in respect of acts done, etc., on any claim for award of pension in respect of injuries sustained by a person, right? So all of these are the functions that are supposed to be performed by the UPSC now, or state public service commissions for that matter. So what is the composition of these bodies supposed to look like? So you write down a few things related to the composition. I'm just again briefly telling you what the composition of these bodies is. ये सब चीजें जो हैं बहुत ही factual है, and I am therefore not covering them in detail in the class. So what the composition of UPSC is, but इसका मतलब ये नहीं है मैं class में cover नहीं कर रहा हूँ, तो you don't need to go through them, because prelims examination, these are all very important facts. So what the composition of the UPSC is supposed to look like? First, please write down, the constitution does not specify the strength of the commission. So there is no strength of the commission that has been mentioned in the Constitution of India. The Constitution does not specify the strength of the commission, and it has been left in the hands of the president, which is basically the union government, and it has been left in the hands of the president. Now, the commission is supposed to consist of, you can write down, it shall consist of chairman and other members. Chairman and other members to be appointed by the President of India. Chairman and other members to be appointed by the President of India. Chairman and the other members of the UPSC, है ना? तो ये जो है it is decided by the President of India. Also, what their service conditions would be is also decided by the President of India. So the service conditions of the chairperson, of the members of UPSC, are also decided by the President of India, which is basically by the union government. But there is one requirement which has been mentioned in proviso to 316 clause 1, which is that at least half of the members of the UPSC should be people those who have at least 10 years of administrative experience within the government. So you please write down, at least 50% of the members of UPSC should have at least 50 members of UPSC should have held an office under the government, for at least 10 years, बस इतना ही है, उसके अलावा और कोई क्वालिफिकेशन नहीं है, और ये भी केवल 50% मेंबर्स के लिए है. यूजुअली यूपीएससी का जैसे हम साइज की बात करें, सो इट इज सपोज टू बी बिटवीन 9 to 11 members, but it varies. But what you need to keep in mind is no qualifications etc have been prescribed, except that at least 50% members should be people those who have more than 10 years of experience in government job, right? In that government job could be government job of the union or of the state, it doesn't matter. So that's one thing that we need to keep in mind. Then what are the tenure of the members of the UPSC supposed to look, members and chairperson of the UPSC supposed to look like, mentioned in article 316 clause 2. So please write down tenure. A member shall hold the office for a term of 6 years. A member shall hold the office for a term of 6 years or 65 years age, whichever is earlier in case of UPSC. A member shall hold the office for a term of 6 years or the age of 65 years, whichever is earlier for UPSC, and 6 years or 62 years or 62 years for a member of SPSC, State Public Service Commission. 6 years or 62 years for a member of State Public Service Commission. Now, let's talk about how does vacancy arise in the office of, let's say, a UPSC member or chairperson. So you can write down vacancy in UPSC. Vacancy in UPSC. और स्टेट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन का भी आप पैरेलली ड्रॉ कर लीजिएगा, है ना? अगर देखिए जॉइंट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन है तो इट इज गवर्न्ड बाय द सेंटर, बट इफ इट इज अ स्टेट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन it is largely governed by the state. So one is that a member of UPSC or chairperson of UPSC or a member of Joint Public Service Commission or chairperson of Joint Public Service Commission can resign from his office by submitting the resignation to the President of India, and a member or chairperson of State Public Service Commission can resign from the office by submitting the resignation to the governor of the state. So you please write down that first. A member of UPSC or JPSC, a member of UPSC or JPSC may resign from a member of UPSC or JPSC may resign from the office by submitting the resignation to the president. By submitting the resignation to the president. तो एक तो vacancy can happen due to resignation and of course death as well. And the second way in which the vacancy may occur is due to removal, and the provisions of which have been mentioned in Article 317 of the Constitution. So let's talk about the removal procedure for the members of UPSC, and you can read up for the members of the State Public Service Commission as well. So you see Article 317 says that subject to provisions of clause 3, the chairman or any other member of a public service commission shall only be removed from his office by order of president on the grounds of misbehavior after the Supreme Court or on reference being made to it by president has on inquiry held in accordance with procedure prescribed in that behalf under 145 reported that chairman or such other member as the case may be ought to on any such ground be removed. तो अगर सुप्रीम कोर्ट एक इंक्वायरी करती है और उस इंक्वायरी में दे फाइंड दैट पर्सन और चेयरपर्सन, member or chairperson guilty of misbehavior, we understand what misbehavior is broadly, right? Something which is unbecoming of a chairperson or member of UPSC or State Public Service Commission. If someone has been involved in gross misappropriation of funds, someone has been involved in misuse of that person's office, someone has been involved in a corrupt act, that would be called as misbehavior. In that case, if an inquiry holds that that person is indeed guilty of misbehavior, then that person can be removed by an order of the president made upon the inquiry of the Supreme Court of India. So you please write down, the president can remove the chairperson or any member of public service commission, और ये केवल यूपीएससी की बात नहीं हो रही है. The president can remove the chairperson or any member of a public service commission on the grounds of misbehavior. On the grounds of misbehavior after an inquiry of the Supreme Court, after an inquiry of the Supreme Court, after an inquiry of the Supreme Court has held that person after an inquiry of the Supreme Court has held that person guilty of the same, guilty of the same. Then नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ प्लीज राइट डाउन. अब ये एक और चीज लिखी है, देखिए 317 के अंदर रिमूवल विल बी डन बाय द गवर्नर, बाय द प्रेसिडेंट on the grounds of misbehavior upon inquiry conducted by Supreme Court of India. And if you read Article 317 Clause 2, it says that the President in case of Union Commission or a Joint Commission and Governor in case of a State Commission may suspend from the office chairperson or any member of the Commission in respect of whom reference has been made to Supreme Court under Clause 1 until President has passed orders on receipt of report of Supreme Court on such reference. अब ये बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है, देखिए बड़ा माइन्यूट डिफरेंस है, that the removal is supposed to be done by President of both UPSC, JPSC and State Public Service Commission, but suspension pending such inquiry by the Supreme Court of India has to be made by President or Governor, whichever Public Service Commission it may be concerned. If it is the JPSC or UPSC, it will be President, and the suspension order will be given by the Governor in case of a member or chairperson of SPSC. Please keep that in mind. Now then, if you see one more thing, notwithstanding anything in clause 1, the president may, अब ये क्या हो सकता है, यूपीएससी आपको कंफ्यूज करने के लिए प्रीलिम्स एग्जाम में क्वेश्चन दे देगी, that the members of the UPSC can be removed by the president and members of State Public Service Commission can be removed by governor. आपको लगेगा कि ये तो बिल्कुल ठीक बात है, but that is not what it is. Please just keep that in mind. Anyway, now please write down, please see clause 3. एक बार clause 3 पढ़िएगा. And ये इसलिए भी important है because see, appointment is made by the governor in case of State Public Service Commission, but the removal on grounds of misbehavior is done by the President of India. It's a point on which UPSC can actually make a question very easily in the prelims examination and get the candidates confused. Anyway, now notwithstanding anything in clause 1, मतलब कि apart from misbehavior and inquiry performed by Supreme Court, the President may by order remove from the office chairperson or any other member of Public Service Commission if the chairperson or such other member as the case may be. is, अब ये देखिए किसी भी पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन की बात हो रही है, if that person is adjudged and insolvent or engages during his term of office in any paid employment outside the duty of the office, or is in the opinion of the president unfit to continue in that office due to the infirmity of mind or body. So you please write down, the president may by order remove a member or chairperson of a PSC. The president may by order remove a member or chairperson of PSC if first A or one, whatever you may want to write down, person has become insolvent or bankrupt basically. Second, has engaged in paid employment outside the duty of office, engaged in paid employment outside the duty of office, outside the duty of office. And third, is physically or mentally unfit to continue in the office. Physically or mentally unfit to continue in the office. Right? So this is removal. Also, do read Article 317 Clause 4 later on. उसमें बेसिकली ये मेंशन्ड है कि मिसबिहेवियर की डेफिनेशन का एक एस्पेक्ट उसमें मेंशन किया हुआ है. That is, if any chairperson or a member of a public service commission becomes interested in any contract or agreement made by or on behalf of government of India or government of state, or participates in any kind of profit or benefit or emolument from such contract, then in such a case that person shall be held guilty of or deemed guilty of misbehavior. तो government ने कोई contract sign किया for procurement of something, और गवर्नमेंट इज डूइंग सम काइंड ऑफ अ बिजनेस विद सम एंटिटी जहां पे आपको उससे फायदा होगा या प्रॉफिट होगा, देन इन दैट केस ऑल्सो इट मे बी कॉल्ड एज मिसबिहेवियर, इज व्हाट आर्टिकल 317 क्लॉज 4 इज टेलिंग. सो एक one aspect of misbehavior has been defined in article 317 clause 4. Just keep that in mind. So this is as far as the removal is concerned. Of course, see, resignation, death, removal, and then we have the end of tenure as well of the member of UPSC or member of State Public Service Commission. Now, considering the fact that we want merit-based services in India, we want services that should be driven by the principle of meritocracy, it means that our appointment to the services should be made by a body which is completely independent and fair in its functioning. And that is why UPSC and State Public Service Commission need to be secured from any kind of excessive interference by the government as well. So what are the provisions that have been included in the Constitution for ensuring the independence of the public service commissions? So you may give the heading independence of public service commissions. How does Constitution ensure the independence of public service commissions? तो एक तो सिक्योरिटी ऑफ टेन्योर दिया है, दैट दे कैन बी रिमूव्ड ओनली ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ द ग्राउंड्स दैट हैव बीन मेंशन्ड इन द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. फर्स्ट यू राइट डाउन, रिमूवल कैन हैपन ओनली ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ ग्राउंड्स मेंशन्ड इन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन. Removal can happen only on the basis of grounds mentioned in the Constitution. Only on the basis of grounds mentioned in the constitution. Mentioned in the constitution. Next, please write down. Conditions of service cannot be reduced to disadvantage. वही same point जो हम और offices में भी discuss करते आए हैं. Conditions of service cannot be reduced to disadvantage after appointment, of course. Conditions of service cannot be reduced to disadvantage. Then next, expenses are a charged expenditure. Expenses are a charged expenditure on the consolidated fund of India or state, whatever the case is. Expenses are a charged expenditure on the consolidated fund. फिर एक और इंटरेस्टिंग चीज देखिएगा, 319 prohibition as to holding of offices by members of commission on ceasing to be such members. On ceasing to hold the office, the chairman of UPSC shall be ineligible for further employment either under Government of India or Government of State. Chairman of State PSC shall be eligible for appointment as chairman or member of UPSC or chairman of some other state PSC, but not for employment of either under the Government of India or Government of a state. Member other than chairman of UPSC shall be eligible for appointment as chairman of UPSC or as chairman of state PSC, but not for any other employment. And member other than chairman of a state PSC shall be appointed eligible for appointment as chairman or member of UPSC or as chairman of other state PSC, but not other any employment. तो ये sequence याद रखिएगा. That मैं broadly बस ये लिखवाऊंगा that there is a prohibition on re-employment under the government, but अगर आप if you have retired as member of UPSC, you can be appointed as chairperson of UPSC or as a chairperson of a state PSC. आप member नहीं बन सकते state. अब देखिए वैसे भी it will be so demeaning that you were member of UPSC and you went on to take an appointment as chairperson of member of state PSC. You are degrading yourself, right? So you become chairperson of state PSC, fine. One, if you were chairperson of UPSC, then the doors are closed for you, right? Because it says chairman of UPSC shall be ineligible for any kind of further employment under the Government of India or Government of State. If you were a member of the State Public Service Commission, you can become chairperson of State Public Service Commission of some other state, or you can become the member of UPSC or chairperson of UPSC. No problem in that, right? And these are the things which you need to keep in mind. तो बस इतना ध्यान रखिएगा that there is a sequence. If you are chairperson of UPSC, no further appointment. If you are a member of UPSC, you can become chairperson of state PSC or chairperson of UPSC. If you are a chairperson of state PSC, you can become chairperson of some other public service commission, state, or member or chairperson of UPSC. And if you are a member of state PSC, you can become chairperson of state PSC or member or chairperson of UPSC, right? So you please write down the members and chairpersons are prohibited. Members and chairpersons are prohibited for re-employment or for appointment under government. Are prohibited for employment under government, of course both state and union, subject to certain conditions. वो subject to certain conditions आप देख लीजिएगा, मैं लिखवा नहीं रहा हूं, but I have explained that to you. Subject to certain conditions. Anyway, now then, so this is as far as the membership of the UPSC and the appointment and the security of tenure and the independence of the members of the UPSC, etc. is concerned, removal and all of those things. Let's talk about what are some of the challenges or limitations associated with the functioning of the UPSC. So you please give that heading and write down some of the challenges. Challenges or limitations associated with the functioning of the UPSC. So see, first please write down the present recruitment system. और यही आप स्टेट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन में भी ट्रांसपोज कर सकते हैं, वहां पे तो हालत और भी खराब है ऑफ कोर्स. पब्लिक यूपीएससी इज डेफिनेटली 10 times बेटर than the state public service commission. State public service commission, I don't need to tell you what kind of a state they are in. एग्जाम कंडक्ट नहीं होता है सालों सालों, और जब एग्जाम कंडक्ट करते हैं तो एग्जाम लीक हो जाता है. जो एग्जाम कंडक्ट करते हैं उसके अंदर आप एग्जाम की क्वालिटी देखिए, सवाल देखिएगा किस तरीके के सवाल पूछते हैं वो, है ना. अकबर ने कौन से रंग का पजामा पहना था, गांधी जी ने लंगोट किस साल में पहनी थी, इस तरीके के सवाल जो है स्टेट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन के एग्जाम्स में पूछे जाते हैं. और लीक होने की तो बात आप सबको ही पता है, मतलब बहुत साल बाद एग्जाम कंडक्ट किया गया और लीक हो गया. तो ये तो स्टेट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन का हाल है इस देश के अंदर, है ना. मोस्ट ऑफ द स्टेट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशंस अनफॉर्चुनेटली दे आर एक्सट्रीमली करप्ट बॉडीज, है ना. दे आर people, those who are appointed to them are appointed on basis of favoritism, nepotism and extremely corrupt individuals with a pathetic track record. UPSC definitely is much better on that front and continues to maintain its integrity as a constitutional body, fortunately for us. Anyway, otherwise I would not have been teaching for this exam for sure. Then who knows, right? I mean, we work so hard, you give so much to this exam, and then you realize at the end of the exam, before the exam, one day before the exam, you get to know that the paper has been leaked. So then now the year is wasted for candidates, and that is what state public service commissions are up to. You can look at Bihar Public Service Commission. झंडे गाड़े हुए हैं बिहार पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन ने तो एकदम जिस तरीके से एग्जाम कंडक्ट कराते हैं. एनीवे, मध्य प्रदेश स्टेट पब्लिक सर्विस कमीशन, व्यापम स्कैम which no one in this country talks about, but there are such big massive issues which are there. Anyways, the first, please write down, the present recruitment system is archaic in nature and does not suit the requirements. The present recruitment system is archaic in nature and does not suit the requirements of a 21st century democracy. And does not suit the requirements of a 21st century democracy. Please write down full stop. इसी point में आगे, emphasis should be provided on judging the candidates. Emphasis should be provided on judging the candidates from multiple perspectives. From multiple perspectives, including the ability. From multiple perspectives, including the ability to handle stress. Handle stress, taking quick decisions. Taking quick decisions, and above all, empathy and compassion. And above all, empathy and compassion for the weaker sections of the society. And above all, empathy and compassion for the weaker sections of the society. See, the present system of recruitment that exists in UPSC or state public service commissions is very old system based on the Macaulay's scheme drawn by the British government. Largely the exam and the system for recruitment remains the same. थोड़े बहुत changes इधर उधर हुए हैं, but there are massive reforms which are required. If you read the Baswan committee report or if you read the Hota committee report, you will find that they have made several recommendations to improve the system. For example, if I were to tell you the way the recruitment is happening, See, it's very unscientific to be eliminating such large number of candidates, those who have put in such hard work, on the basis of 100 questions in the prelims examination, and that too on basis of a 2-hour examination. It is absolutely unscientific. What if someone has a bad day? What if someone has bad 2 hours? You are going to eliminate that candidate and going to waste that person's 1 year. Ideally, either you should have multiple examinations being conducted through the year so that you don't waste the time and the energy of the youth. Some of the brightest and the most talented youth of this country is appearing in this examination where it is absolutely unscientific, where you don't know what is going to be the result. One is that. Second big problem which is there in the examination scheme is that they are not really judging you on your empathy, compassion, on your ability to take decisions in tough situations, how you would manage people. What they are judging you is on basis of those written answers which have been written on most complicated questions within a span of 8 to 10 minutes. They are asking you to comment on AFSPA, they are asking you to comment on situations of internal security, they are asking you to comment on issues facing the society, on climate change, environment, economy, within a span of 8 to 10 minutes. In that 8 to 10 minutes, a person cannot really express himself or herself properly. You can only write what pleases the examiner. That is the unfortunate truth about this exam. Right? They are not really judging you with what your character is, what your personality is. Interview that hardly lasts for 15 minutes is not a true judge of your personality. Which person in this world can judge anyone's personality in 15 minutes or 20 minutes? At times interviews last less than 10 minutes, right? So in that situation, how could you be judging what the character of that person is? It is literally spending very less face time with the candidate, UPSC itself. I am talking about UPSC only. The face time that they are spending with the candidate is very less. You look at the recruitment systems across the world, they have changed significantly. You must ask the candidate to write down possibly a statement of purpose or an essay and a whole lot of other things to judge how that person thinks. But unfortunately, this exam to a large extent has become a speed writing contest. So that is one problem which is there. Secondly, not that the syllabus of the exam is very relevant. See, most of the people, those who land up at the Labasana, they have zero clue about law. They have zero clue about public administration. They have zero clue about how exactly the government functions within. They don't really know. And I'm telling this to you, this preparation of the examination is just a tip of the iceberg. When you get into the real system, you will understand how law actually functions. Because you have not really touched upon the CPC and the CRPCs, etc., which you actually have to enforce as a civil servant. And not that the training is something which is very scientific, which is taking place at the academies, except possibly SVNPA, the National Police Academy. I would say that the training which is conducted at most of the academies is very substandard, and it is unscientific, and it is outdated, and it needs to be reformed completely. And this is not something which is my opinion personally. You just need to go and pick up the reports of any of these expert committees and you will get the same opinion that has been expressed by them. The fact that the last change in the pattern of this examination took place 10 years back itself tells you so many things. Today, so many newer issues have come up which the civil servants need to face, whether it is data governance, whether it is cryptocurrency, whether it is cyber security, whether it is artificial intelligence. How many of the candidates actually are well versed with these ideas which are going to be a game changer in the 21st century? So with this kind of recruitment, we can only expect monkeys to be recruited, those who would not really have much of the idea of what is happening in rest of the world. Right? So this needs to change drastically is what we need to understand. So that is one. Second, you please write down the UPSC. इसी पॉइंट में आगे लिखिएगा, सॉरी. इन दिस रिगार्ड यूपीएससी में लर्न फ्रॉम, इन दिस रिगार्ड, इसी पॉइंट के अंदर रिक्रूटमेंट सिस्टम को चेंज करने की बात में, इन दिस रिगार्ड यूपीएससी में लर्न फ्रॉम रिक्रूटमेंट प्रोसेस ऑफ इंटरनेशनल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस. UPSC may learn from recruitment process of international organizations such as the World Bank, and the Indian Armed Forces, such as the World Bank and the Indian Armed Forces. See, आर्मी का जब रिक्रूटमेंट होता है, एसएसबी का जब सिलेक्शन प्रोसेस होता है, दे स्पेंड 5 days विद द कैंडिडेट. They see the candidate, how that person behaves when he is in command, how that person behaves when he is working in a group, how that person behaves when he is given an individual task, how that person behaves when he is working under someone's command. They see what kind of the equation the person has with others in the group dynamics. All of these things are important. Here you are simply judging a person largely on the basis of a written test, which is very flawed. You are choosing a person not to become a scholar. You are choosing a person to become an administrator. That person needs to have good people skills. That person needs to know how to manage people, how to motivate people, how to lead people. You can't be choosing leaders through a written examination. That is not how things work. So there is a lot that can be learned. World Bank, when it recruits, it spends good 1-2 days with the candidate from day to night. Lunch, breakfast, dinner, everything had together, so as to actually see what the person is inside out. और यहाँ पे हम 15 मिनट में उल्टे पुल्टे सवाल पूछ के कैंडिडेट से जज करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि उसकी पर्सनालिटी क्या है. It won't work. It really would not work. And that is why the system is rotten. That is why when some of you will land up at the academy, and I am not kidding this. You can ask this from people. When you land up at the academy, you will find monkeys there, literally. And you will be surprised that how did these people get recruited. But the fact is that the system is flawed, unfortunately. That is why there are so many schemes and programs of the government that fall flat on their face. Because we need to severely reform the system of recruitment. This needs to change drastically. Next, please write down. The services are out of touch. The services are out of touch with new developments in technology and the society. The services are out of touch with new developments in technology and the society. The UPSC needs to upgrade their capacity. The UPSC needs to upgrade their capacity by engaging with organizations. By engaging with organizations in private sector and civil society. By engaging with organizations in private sector and civil society to evolve specially designed courses. To evolve specially designed courses. Next, the commission is presently overburdened with work. The commission is presently overburdened with work, and there is a need to recruit more staff. And there is a need to recruit more staff to aid its functioning. There is a need to recruit more staff to aid its functioning. See, presently the government is overburdened with, the UPSC is overburdened with work. The number of staff or people that they have to conduct such a huge examination itself is very less. They need to have more people to aid them in the functioning of the organization or the commission. Next, please write down. The emergence of the CVC, Central Vigilance Commission. The emergence of the CVC has created overlapping functions with the UPSC. The emergence of the CVC has created overlapping functions with the UPSC. Therefore, there is a need to delineate. DELINEATE, deviate मत लिख देना, कुछ भी लिख सकता है कोई. Therefore, there is a need to delineate the functions to establish an effective accountability mechanism. The functions to establish an effective accountability mechanism. देखिए CVC is a body that is supposed to provide inputs to the government on the disciplinary action to be taken against the erring officers of the central government. Say for example, UPSC का भी यही काम है. तो अब गवर्नमेंट के ऊपर डिपेंड करता है कि वो सीबीसी को कंसल्ट करे या यूपीएससी को कंसल्ट करे अगर किसी सिविल सर्वेंट के खिलाफ डिसिप्लिनरी एक्शन लेना है. यूजुअली ideally UPSC should be given priority because it is a constitutional body. CVC is a statutory body. But फिर CVC का क्या काम रह जाएगा अगर UPSC को कंसल्ट किया जाएगा तो. So there is a confusion. As a result of that, often the civil servants are able to find an excuse out of this system. ना तो CVC ढंग से इंक्वायरी करती है ना UPSC ढंग से इंक्वायरी करती है, and therefore they escape from this. So we need to clearly delineate the functions between UPSC and CVC so that there is clarity on who is supposed to perform what functions and accountability can be ensured of these bodies. Next, please write down the discussions on the reports of the UPSC. The discussions on the reports of the UPSC have been limited in the parliament. Have been limited in the parliament, which has compromised the effective accountability of the institution as well as the government in the domain of recruitment. So, जो यूपीएससी की रिपोर्ट होती है वो पार्लियामेंट में टेबल की जाती है बाय द प्रेसिडेंट थ्रू द प्रेसिडेंट ऑफ इंडिया. And there is supposed to be a discussion on the performance of UPSC as an organization, but unfortunately not a lot of that happens in the parliament, and that itself compromises its functioning. Next, please write down the functioning of the state public service commissions has been a matter of concern. The functioning of state public service commissions has been a matter of concern, and urgent reforms are required. To restore their lost credibility. Urgent reforms are required to restore their lost credibility. तो ये कुछ issues हैं which are there with respect to the functioning of the public service commissions in India, and if in mains examination a question is asked, possibly you can use some of these pointers to write down the answers. Now let's quickly have a look at this particular handout. I'll just take you through this handout and we'll call up the class. So in this what I have done is, देखिए ह्यूमन राइट बॉडीज जो हैं, यूपीएससी इसके ऊपर 3-4 सवाल पूछ चुका है. हर बार सवाल जो है वो लार्जली सेम ही तरीके का रहता है क्योंकि ये सारी बॉडीज जो हैं विच यू कैन सी ऑन द बोर्ड, वेदर कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनली created bodies or which have been created by a statute of the parliament or the legislature, इनके फंक्शन सबके एक जैसे ही हैं. कॉम्पोजिशन वगैरह सब आप देख लीजिएगा खुद से, कॉम्पोजिशन एंड स्ट्रक्चर एक्सेट्रा प्रीलिम्स के लिए, बट उसमें भी डोंट स्पेंड अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम अननेसेसरली. बस जस्ट ट्राई टू सी एनएचआरसी का कॉम्पोजिशन देख लीजिएगा बिकॉज उस पर कई बार क्वेश्चन पूछ लेता है, या फिर एनसीएससी का एक कॉम्पोजिशन देख लीजिएगा, दैट यू विल गिव यू एन आइडिया ऑफ व्हाट इज द कॉम्पोजिशन ऑफ द अदर बॉडीज एज वेल, बट डोंट स्पेंड अ लॉट ऑफ टाइम ऑन दैट. What is important is the functions of these bodies. So I'll just take you through what the functions of each of these bodies is, which are very similar to each other. जैसे अगर हम नेशनल कमीशन फॉर शेड्यूल कास्ट की बात करें, इसका क्या फंक्शन है? इट इज सपोज टू सी that the safeguards that have been mentioned in the constitution and in the law for the scheduled castes, whether those safeguards are properly followed or not. That is what it is supposed to see. So for example, provisions under 15, provisions under 16, provisions under 17, and any other provisions for the upliftment of the scheduled castes in the constitution, whether they are being followed properly or not, that is what this NCSC is supposed to do, and make a report on that, on what are the shortcomings, what have been the good things, what are some of the improvements which are required. Second, they are supposed to inquire into complaints with respect to deprivation of rights of these marginalized sections. So some scheduled caste has been discriminated against, he can write to NCSC. Some scheduled tribe has been discriminated against, he can write to NCST. Some OBC has been discriminated against, or some violation of their rights have happened, they can write to NCBC, and so on and so forth. Women have been discriminated against, they can write to NCW. Not just that, but they can suo motu also take cognizance of any such matters which come to their notice through newspaper reports, etc., where the rights of these marginalized sections of the society have been violated. They are also supposed to advise the center or the state governments on schemes for the upliftment and economic development of these marginalized sections, whether it is women, whether it is children, whether it is scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, whatever. Then they are supposed to regularly report to the president on how the on the working of the safeguards provided by constitution and law, whether they are working properly or not, etc., and all of that in their report. They are supposed to promote research, encourage NGOs in the field of human rights, in the field of upliftment of scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, human rights, child rights, women rights, etc., whatever it is. You have to keep this in mind कि ये एक broad framework है, इसी को आप बस twist कर दीजिएगा according to whatever commission you are talking about. Women के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं तो women की बात, child के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं तो child, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, whatever it is. Then, while making inquiries into complaints, the commission enjoys the power of civil court. They also study treaties, international instruments, etc., which are in place, learn from best practices, and provide recommendations to the government on how these best practices can be incorporated in India. Any other functions which may be given to them by the government to advance the interest of these marginalized sections of the society. They are also involved in spreading literacy among the people of these marginalized sections with respect to what their rights are, how they can be using these rights, how they can be safeguarding their interests, etc. So broadly, these are the functions that are supposed to be performed by all of these human right bodies. ये NHRC पे भी ऐसे ही लगेगा क्योंकि वो human rights की बात कर रहा है, NCW पे भी वैसे ही लगेगा, NCPCR पे भी ऐसे ही लगेगा, whichever body you are talking about. Now, what are some of the challenges or the limitations of these human rights bodies, commissions, etc.? Again, challenges are also largely very similar. First is, they do not have any investigation machinery of their own. Suppose कीजिएगा कहीं पर riots हो गए, NHRC को इन्वेस्टिगेट करना है कि क्या स्टेट गवर्नमेंट का इन्वॉल्वमेंट था उस राइट्स को प्रमोट करने में, या स्टेट पुलिस ने ढंग से काम नहीं किया व्हेन द राइट्स वर हैपनिंग, डिड दे नॉट टेक प्रॉपर एक्शन. NHRC does not have an investigation machinery of its own. It would have to rely upon either the CBI or the state police machinery for investigation, and you can expect that those machinery are not really going to give a fair or an unbiased report, right? Either they will give a report which is very adverse of the role of the state police and state government if they are controlled by the central government. अगर CBI देगी report और state government की involvement है जो कि opposition party ruled है तो they will give an adverse report. अगर state police report देगी तो then they will of course give it in the favor of the state government only. What has happened so many times, whether you look at the Gujarat riots, whether you look at the Delhi riots, whether you look at the agitations that happened in Haryana a few years back, you will find that in all of these investigation reports that have been handed over to these human rights bodies, they were a mere eyewash, unfortunately. Secondly, they are only recommendatory bodies and their recommendations are not binding on the government. So whatever recommendations that they will even give in the reports are not necessarily binding on the government. So government के ऊपर depend करता है whether they will accept them or not, and most of the times their recommendations are junked. Third, they cannot entertain or inquire into complaints that are older than a certain period of time, जिसको हम कहते हैं लिमिटेशन पीरियड. जैसे एनएचआरसी है, उसके ऊपर एक लिमिटेशन पीरियड है 1 साल का. 1 साल से पुराना कोई भी अगर ह्यूमन राइट वायलेशन का केस है, आप उसको एनएचआरसी के अंदर रेज नहीं कर सकते. So that is a problem which is there under some of these laws. The appointments are made on the basis of political consideration. आप जाके देखिएगा, who are people, those who are sitting in NCW, NCPCR, etc. You will find child molester sitting in NCPCR. You will find sexual assaulter sitting in NCW. So then, and this is not just about NCW or NCPCR. This is about the state commissions as well, right? So appointments are made on the basis of political considerations. So what we also call in polity as the Rakshak Bhakshak syndrome. जो आदमी एक्चुअली प्रोटेक्टर है, इफ दैट पर्सन हिमसेल्फ और हरसेल्फ इज अ मोलेस्टर एंड असॉल्टर, तो वो क्या किसी के राइट को प्रोटेक्ट करेगा? दैट इज जेन्युइनली अ प्रॉब्लम विद द अपॉइंटमेंट टू दीज बॉडीज. देन they have limited powers to suggest actions against armed forces related to the violation of human rights by armed forces etc. So इसके अंदर भी इनके पास बहुत ही limited powers हैं. They can't really interfere into those matters as such. They can only seek a report or provide recommendations, but whether they are followed up or not is not in their hands. Then people lack awareness with respect to the functioning of these bodies, and as a result people often do not come to these bodies for raising the issues which they are facing. Most of these bodies suffer on the account of shortage of staff and vacancies due to delayed appointments which have hampered their effective functioning, right? So that is also another issue. State governments, central governments often do not make timely appointments to these bodies. Chairpersons are not appointed on a timely basis. As a result of that, most of these bodies continue to remain ineffective in their functioning. A number of these bodies have overlapping function. देखिए ये भी बड़ा issue है. एक दलित बच्चे के साथ सपोज कीजिएगा कोई sexual assault का केस आता है. Now should that case go to Human Rights Commission? Should that case go to NCPCR? Or should that case be going to the National Commission for Scheduled Caste is anyone's guess, and which creates a lot of confusion and chaos, and overlapping functions always result in lack of accountability as well. Too many cooks always spoil the broth, right? Because क्लैरिटी नहीं है ना कि किसका फंक्शन है, तो हर कोई दूसरे को ब्लेम कर सकता है कि ये तो मैंने नहीं देखना था, ये तो किसी और ने देखना था, एंड दैट रियली क्रिएट्स अ प्रॉब्लम बिकॉज marginalized sections can have overlaps as well, is what you need to understand. Then many of these bodies lack accessibility to the common man. For example, NCST only has 6 regional offices in the entire country. So if you are in these 6 cities or close to them, you can raise your complaint. Otherwise, modern means of communication etc. are not known to people, those who are sitting in these organizations, and they don't really often entertain complaints through those modes. So that's something which we need to understand as the problems are concerned. इसी तरीके से मैंने इनकी फंक्शनिंग के ऊपर क्या रिफॉर्म्स रिक्वायर्ड हैं वो मैंने मेंशन कर दिया है. NHRC के ऊपर specifically I have mentioned what their composition is supposed to be and what their term and removal and all of those things are, because इस पे specifically कुछ questions UPSC पूछ चुकी है, and you can look at some of the important cases taken up by NHRC as well. Plus आप internet पे भी थोड़ा search करेंगे, you will get many more instances in which NHRC's work has been applauded as well, whether it is visiting the jail and trying to give report on the functioning of the jails in the country, or whether it is NHRC suo motu taking cognizance of the Gujarat riots and the violence that happened during the Gujarat riots etc. and all of those things. So there NHRC has done reasonably well, but there is still a lot of scope for improvement. इसमें एक चीज और बची है with respect to the Human Rights Commission that I will discuss with you tomorrow, and after we are done with this I will briefly take up the discussion on the Union Territories, and then we will take up the last topic which will be related to elections, Election Commission, और थोड़ा सा discussion I will do on the comparison of the constitutions as well of India with that of the other countries, even though most of that thing we have already done in our throughout our classes. For example, Indian judiciary with the US judiciary, or for example Indian human fundamental rights with the US fundamental rights etc. and all of that, but we will still do a broad discussion of some of those themes in the next class, right? Fine, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next class.